Dear ministers, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and everybody who are following this session virtually, I'm so glad to welcome you all to Finland, to Helsinki. I'm so glad that we're here today, all to join the very first ministerial meeting of the School Meals Coalition. I would particularly welcome all the coalition's Taskforce members and special guests who have traveled to this meeting in Finland. The coalition, the School Meal Coalition, was launched in the Food Systems Summit last year. We are therefore marking an important milestone here. I'm so glad to be able to say that the work of the coalition has got off with a great start, and already we see great results. So far, already 73 countries and 70 partner organizations have joined the coalition. Its geographical scope spans the entire globe. Particularly in these times of international division, it is great to see that school meals has been an issue that is uniting various parts of the world. It's doing so for a good reason. School meals programs are among the smartest investments for the future. A school meal goes far beyond a plate of food. Evidence also demonstrates that school meals produce high returns in terms of education results, gender equality, health, social protection, and economic and agricultural development. In Finland, we have our own strong experience on the benefits of school meals. In the beginning of the 20th century, Finland was a poor country where 40% of all 15-year-olds didn't know how to read. School feeding was a transformative social innovation of its time. Finland has now been providing free school meals for all students for over 70 years. School meals programs are a key part of the Finnish education success story. We are sincerely hoping, and we do believe, that through establishing and enhancing school meal programs, other countries can achieve similar results. This is particularly important now as many countries are facing an unprecedented food crisis. And as we move ahead, I would underline the need to look for solutions that innovations and digitalization can bring. Resources are scarce, and we are really need to be innovative to tackle the challenges at the hand. Finland has its own experience here that we are ready to share with you. We are here today as decision makers. We are here today as experts on school meals. For this session, we have a high-level speaker, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohamed. We will also showcase donor and country actions from the ground. I will now give the floor to my French colleague, who will speak more in detail about School Meals Coalition itself. I would also like to take this opportunity to warmly thank France, who has been leading the coalition jointly with Finland. Thank you for our good cooperation. And thereafter, I'm pleased to invite the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Mr. David Beasley, to take the floor. Great to have you here, David, in Helsinki. And from you, I understand we will hear more about the global situation and how enhancing school meals can and could play a role in tackling these huge current crises. Ladies and gents, the School Meals Coalition has a great momentum. Let's build on this and jointly achieve our goals. But now I will give the floor to our French colleague. Please, Monsieur, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Minister, for your warm welcome. Thank you all, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And I think now actually there will be a video from my minister, because you know she was supposed to be here, but she had to fly to India last night, but she really wanted to participate in our meeting this morning. So if your team is ready and agrees, there will be the video, and I'll take the floor later on during the day. But thank you very, very much for having us. And as you said, it's a very important milestone today for our coalition.
Monsieur le ministre Kinari, Monsieur le directeur exécutif du Programme alimentaire mondial, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, chers amis, en cette période tourmentée, nous devons tous nous mobiliser pour que nos enfants ne payent pas l'addition des crises. Les crises des 3 dernières années ont eu de graves répercussions sur les enfants. La pandémie Covid-19 a provoqué la fermeture des écoles dans le monde entier, en plus d'une sévère crise économique. Et l'agression russe en Ukraine a considérablement aggravé la crise alimentaire mondiale. Aujourd'hui, près de la moitié des personnes confrontées à la faim aiguë dans le monde au moins de 18 ans, soit 153 millions d'enfants au total. Dans ce contexte, nous devons préserver et développer ce qui fonctionne. C'est pour cela que nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui autour de cette formidable coalition pour l'alimentation scolaire, initiée par le Programme alimentaire mondial. Comme la Finlande, que je remercie pour son accueil, la France est aux côtés du PAM depuis les premiers jours de cette coalition et fière de coprésider cette Taskforce. En France, les cantines scolaires, qui servent 1 milliard de repas par an et font partie de notre patrimoine national. L'accès aux repas à l'école fait aujourd'hui pleinement partie de notre politique éducative fondée sur la lutte contre les inégalités. C'est pour cela que nous cherchons sans cesse à renforcer cet accès avec des politiques sociales comme celles décidées par le président de la République sous le mandat précédent. La mise en place de petits déjeuners gratuits dans des écoles de nos quartiers les plus défavorisés et une offre de cantine à 1 euro pour les familles les plus modestes en zone rurale. Nous sommes aussi très soucieux de la qualité de ces repas qui doivent favoriser une alimentation saine et équilibrée et constituer un vecteur d'éducation culinaire. Vous savez tous à quel point les Français sont fiers de leur gastronomie. Ces combats pour une alimentation scolaire accessible et de qualité, nous les portons aussi au niveau international. C'est pour cela que nous sommes heureux de porter l'objectif que tous les enfants puissent bénéficier d'ici 2030 d'un repas sain et nutritif à l'école. Nous devons accompagner chacun des pays pour parvenir à cette solution. Nous devons rattraper les retards pris durant la pandémie, mais aussi utiliser notre dynamique pour aller chercher les populations les plus vulnérables et éloignées des systèmes éducatifs. Pour y parvenir, la méthode de cette coalition est la bonne et illustre une nouvelle logique partenariale. Elle associe en effet les pays du Nord et les pays du Sud, mais aussi les organisations internationales, les centres de recherche et l'organisation des sociétés civiles. Il appartient à chacun de mettre toutes ses forces dans cette bataille, de partager ses solutions et de soutenir les autres dans leur mise en œuvre. L'alimentation scolaire a des bénéfices majeurs, pas seulement pour lutter contre la pauvreté et la malnutrition infantile. Elle contribue aussi massivement au développement humain des sociétés, en favorisant l'accès à l'éducation et en améliorant la qualité de l'apprentissage parce qu'on n'apprend rien le ventre vide. En réduisant aussi les inégalités entre les filles et les garçons, parce que ce sont toujours les filles qui sont privées d'école en première, mais aussi en soutenant les producteurs alimentaires locaux. Cette coalition doit contribuer à les faire savoir et accroître ainsi la mobilisation internationale pour cette cause. Cette mobilisation, la France y prend toute sa part, en contribuant au fonctionnement de cette coalition, bien sûr, en échangeant nos bonnes pratiques, en mobilisant nos chercheurs, mais surtout en finançant directement des projets d'alimentation scolaire mis en œuvre par le Programme alimentaire mondial et des autres opérateurs. En 2021, nous avons ainsi consacré 13 millions d'euros à un projet en Afghanistan. Nous soutenons aussi des projets au Yémen, en Haïti, en Algérie et très prochainement en Ukraine. Au total, nous consacrons 28 millions d'euros au soutien à des cantines scolaires dans nos pays partenaires. Nous sommes également très investis au sein du Partenariat mondial pour l'éducation qui comprend un volet alimentaire scolaire. Et pour poursuivre cet engagement et mobiliser au maximum nos partenaires, nous serons heureux d'accueillir dès 2023 la première réunion mondiale de cette coalition. Mesdames et messieurs, je ne pourrais pas finir sans évoquer l'urgence actuelle, les conséquences de l'agression russe en Ukraine. M. Poutine a choisi de faire de la sécurité alimentaire une arme de guerre, mais pour notre part, nous avons un devoir de solidarité. Là encore, la France est fière de répondre présente aux côtés du PAM, avec l'initiative FARM lancée par le président Emmanuel Macron et soutenue par l'Union européenne, l'Union africaine et les pays des G7 pour approvisionner les pays vulnérables et investir dans la production agricole de long terme. Et avec l'initiative Save Crops, lancée le 21 septembre dernier à New York avec l'Union européenne et l'Union africaine pour faciliter l'accès des pays africains aux engrais. Mesdames et messieurs, la simple idée que des enfants puissent encore aujourd'hui souffrir de la faim doit nous être insupportable. La simple idée que des enfants, et en particulier des filles, ne puissent être scolarisés doit nous être insupportable. Elle doit nous mobiliser. Votre présence nombreuse ici témoigne que nous sommes sur la bonne voie. Alors, continuons. Et pour le faire, je vous donne rendez-vous l'année prochaine à Paris. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Aurélien. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, France, for your great commitment. And now we'll move further, and I'm pleased to hand over the floor to WFP's Executive Director, David Beasley. And as you know, WFP is acting as the Secretariat of the School Meals Coalition. David, please.
Yeah, it's always good to be with you. We had met many times virtually, and I didn't realize that yesterday was the first time we actually saw each other in the real person. You know, it was quite a good thing. The world has changed so much because of COVID, and we were all sort of isolated, but yet we were able to maintain some type of connection because of the virtual reality that exists today. Unfortunately, during that same time period, over 1.7 billion children were out of school, and 370 million of them who normally got a school meal didn't get a school meal. And of course, we know there are millions, that's millions upon millions of children. That's the only school meal that they would, only meal that they would get on a given day. We know the value, those of you in this room, we clearly understand the value of a nutritious meal and what it means to not just that child, but to that community and to the GDP of a nation. In fact, the World Bank just came out with some numbers saying that literally the impact on children today because of COVID and everything we're facing very well could be $21 trillion on the future earnings of those children in those nations, which is about 17% of the global GDP of today. And so my question is not whether you can afford it. My question is, can you afford not to have school meals? I ask very simple questions to leaders. I said, do you want to increase poverty or maintain poverty at the level you have? Then don't have school meals. If you want to make certain that teenage girls continue to get pregnant at early rates in the poor and low and middle income countries, and have high marriage rates of 12, 13, 14-year-olds. If you want that, then don't have school meals. If you want to continue to have recruitment by ISIS and Al-Qaeda and extremist groups and vulnerable populations, don't have school meals. If you don't want gender parity, then don't have school meals. It really is that simple. The mathematics and the analytics with regard to the financial return is so overwhelming. It's so clear. As I tell some of my most hardline fiscal conservatives, why should I send money down to Niger when we've got education funding needs here at home, or bridge issues or infrastructure financial needs? And I said, well, let me explain it, because you're going to pay for it one way or the other. We have seen anecdotally and experientially, and we don't really need any more studies, so it's so clear. We've seen it when we have a school meals program. It's amazing. Migration drops in these very, very fragile areas. Teen pregnancy drops. Marriage rate of 12, 13, 14-year-olds drops. Recruitment by extremist groups drops. Retention rate of children in school increases. School scores for children increases. So everything you want to go down starts going down. Everything you want to start going up goes up in a community. And the impact in the four sectors, like social protection, education, agriculture, and nutrition, is just so clear, so obvious. This is why Finland, for example, led the world in 1943 with the first mandatory law in the world, in the height of when Finland was probably one of the poorest countries on the planet at that time. But look at Finland today. Look at the developed nations on the planet that invested in their children decades ago, realizing an investment today is an investment in our way of life in the future. And so the returns of economic analysis, social protection, social improvement of quality of life, all these things are so obvious. And I look around the room, and I'm for Japan. Look what Japan did right after World War II. Korea after World War II. And I can go from place where Rwanda. Look what Rwanda is doing now. I was just with the president Tola of Benin, what they're doing, realizing the commitments that are so critical. Honduras, the incredible ramping up as we speak, because leaders are recognizing the importance of it. And when you look at the last couple years and see that now over 70% of the children in low and middle income countries under the age of 10 can't read a basic text, that's frightening. That is so shocking. And so it's this first ministerial meeting of the School Meals Coalition. France, thank you. Finland, thank you for taking the leadership, the World Food Program. We are here to support, and I'm not an expert on school meals. I'm an expert at waking up everybody. Wake up, world. Our children need this investment. And this is where we are, Christina. We're going to take the expertise around this room, bring it all together, and hopefully, as an old friend of mine said, all the darkness in the world can't put out the light of one little match. And imagine each one of us being a little match. And when you bring a lot of matches together, what happens? There's a combustion, an explosion of opportunity. And so we look forward to having more comments during the day, and really it's great to be with you in person. And thank all of you for this extraordinary time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for your wake-up expertise. We really need it, and we really appreciate it, and we are ready to follow the suit. Now we go further, and next we will hear the keynote speaker for this conference from UN's Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to greet this first ministerial meeting of the School Meals Coalition. The Secretary General and I appreciate the leadership of the governments of Finland and France for building and sustaining the coalition. And we commend the governments of Benin, Guatemala, Honduras, Iceland, Japan, Kenya, Norway, Rwanda, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Sweden, and the United Arab Emirates, the United States, and the African Union and the European Union for their support. This first ministerial meeting will help lift the momentum of this multi-networked coalition, reflecting the importance of creating a space dedicated to children's education, health, stability, and well-being at schools through school meal programs. Your efforts are helping to ensure that this transformative school program supports local agriculture and markets while making societies more resilient and empowered by reaching children while benefiting farmers, women and girls, entrepreneurs and communities across the world. The School Meals Coalition was launched by 73 governments during the Food Systems Summit, and several member states reiterated their commitment to school meals in their statements at the recent Transforming Education Summit. We now have a global initiative with clear and unequivocal consensus. School meals programs connect several sectors, including education, health, agriculture, and social protection, and they have the potential to accelerate gender-responsive action across multiple SDGs. This is what makes this coalition such a valuable platform and instrumental to grapple with local challenges linked to energy and water insecurity, impacts of droughts, the rising cost of living, in addition to the prevalent food crisis. Now we must scale up these integrated sustainable school meal program, including improving the quality and diversity of nutrients, because they can help tackle the food and health crises and the education crises simultaneously. They can also help us stabilize communities and promote social cohesion. To achieve the coalition's goals, we need an increase in domestic financing, particularly in low middle-income countries. I congratulate the significant investments made by Benin, Honduras, and Rwanda since last year, which demonstrate what is possible. In addition, robust donor support is required to help low-income countries reach self-reliance. We count on the strategic partners and donors of the coalition to provide innovative solutions to the existing financing gaps. Together with the United Nations system, the Secretary-General and I stand ready to work with you all to take stock of progress ahead of next year's SDG Summit and strengthen these interventions as we head towards 2030. As we look toward the future we want for children, I remain hopeful that the spirit of collaboration and collective action of this group of member states and broad stakeholders will ensure that the coalition's efforts are more than the sum of its parts. I wish you all a successful and productive meeting.
Thank you, Amina. And now I have, I'd say, the unpleasant duty to share a message from the European Union, message from the European Union Commissioner for International Partnerships, my dear Finnish colleague, Mrs. Jutta Urpilainen, who was to be our second keynote speaker, but now she's unfortunately not able to participate. She regrets this, but reminds that school meals, education, and food security are key interests to her. She is pleased that the European Commission decided to join the School Meals Coalition. Education and youth are at the heart of her work, and she decided to also increase EU's investment to global education from 7% to 13%. But as we know, it's difficult to make progress on the right to education when basic right, such as food, is not met. Mrs. Urpilainen really encourages us to work together to make sure that young people can thrive. And thank you, European Commission. Thank you, Jutta, for your strong commitment. We will now move into the panel discussions. We have here an impressive and wide list of speakers who are either decision makers or wake-up experts or just experts on school meals. And we are therefore going to hear from several angles about the impact and the benefits of these programs, as well as the importance of investing in them. For this, I will now hand over to Ms. Carmen Burbano, Director of the School based program division at WFP and head of the Secretariat of the Coalition.
Minister Skinnari, thank you so much. I think we also have some words from Gordon Brown, Honourable Gordon Brown of the UK. So maybe we could just pass that video before we go to the panel. Okay.
I want to congratulate the government of Finland, particularly Minister Skinnari, for convening the first ministerial meeting of the School Meals Coalition. Thank France for the joint leadership in this coalition, and congratulate David Beasley for the life-saving work of the World Food Programme and all members of the School Meals Coalition assembled today. And while I'm only able to join you virtually from far away, I feel very close to what you're trying to achieve, your values, your ideas, and your plan to feed the world's children. There is no more powerful religious text than "When I was hungry, you fed me." It is a sacred injunction in every single faith. But 153 million of 345 million people afflicted by acute malnutrition today are children. And the world is facing a triple crisis of malnutrition, poverty, and illiteracy. 260 million school-aged children out of school, and at the age of 11, 70% of low and middle-income country children unable to read a simple text, 89% in Africa. These interlocking crises cannot be solved in isolation. They need to be addressed together. Make no mistake about it, by bringing children into school for both education and nutrition, school meals are children's largest and most cost-effective social safety net in the world. So it is urgent that we now mobilize the $5.8 billion necessary to ensure daily nutritious school meals for 73 million of the most vulnerable children. And I hope that at the SDG Summit next year, additional international funding will be earmarked for school meals, expanding IDA for 200 million children in low-income countries, and for the 700 million children in low and middle-income countries where the majority of out-of-school children live, expanding the new multi-billion international finance facility for education that was launched last month. Our program makes sense to parents, to teachers, to doctors, nutritionists, to all decent people concerned about the large rise in child poverty reported to the recent World Bank meetings. And our School Meals Coalition is not only our chance to deliver the sustainable development goals for children, but give those who are desolate hope. Hope that we can create a world where for the first time in history, every single child is at school learning and properly fed, and where instead of nurturing just some of the potential of some of the children in some parts of the world, we develop all the potential of all children in every part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our keynote speakers and our opening speakers. Thank you to Finland again for this wonderful meeting. Good morning, everyone. My job in this meeting is to keep us talking. So after the initial opening speeches, really the meeting is among us. It's up to you and your ability to share and engage with each other. And so I have two things before we start in terms of rules of the game, how we're going to operate here today. One is we have been engaging with all of you and your teams. The idea is that this is a conversation. So we have asked each and every one of you not to bring any slides, not to bring any written speeches. This is really about, hopefully, a conversation today. And I'll do my best to try and moderate that discussion among ourselves. The second one is we want all of you to speak. You want to speak. That's why you came all the way to Helsinki. So my job will also be to make sure that we keep on time. And unfortunately, that's a very ingrate job. I know that all of you have a lot to say, but I will have to make sure that we keep to the time schedule as has been foreseen. So with those two things, let's start with the first panel of the morning. The first discussion, and we heard a little bit already from the experiences of Finland, of France, the executive director saying there are already a lot of efforts happening around the world. So the first panel is really to bring home one message, the first message of the day, which is we're not here to discuss a hypothetical. We're not here to discuss something that should happen, and we're in theory discussing whether this program is a good idea. These are programs that are happening all around the world right now, governments that are investing a significant amount of resources on this agenda as we speak. So the discussion of now is why? Why is this investment such an important thing? And also hear from some of the governments that are leading the way, particularly in low-income, lower middle-income countries. But first, to get us started, we wanted also to anchor the conversation, also to show that this is not a conversation that's a wish list or anecdotal information. This is a very solid, evidence-based, results-based conversation that we're having today. We thought we would open with some thoughts from Professor Donald Bundy. He is the director of the Research Consortium for School Health and Nutrition, one of the initiatives of the coalition. And he's here today to share with us a little bit of what the evidence is telling us as we frame this discussion to get us started. Professor Bundy, you issued a statement in preparation for this meeting. First of all, thank you so much to you and the research community for anchoring this meeting with an evidence-based statement. And we're here to talk about investment. Why are governments investing in these programs so spectacularly? So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is the evidence telling us? Is this a good investment or not? What are the experts in academia finding from the data?
Great. Well, thank you, Carmen, for asking me that question. You know, yesterday I spent the whole of the day with the Finnish government team and the Finnish government researchers that work on school meals in this country. And, you know, we're talking about nearly, congratulations, Finland. It's your 74th birthday, I think, for universal free school meals programs. You've shown here this is a sustainable program with fantastic results in terms of education. So it's not that we're talking theoretically, and I hope that everything I'm going to say will be based in those kinds of facts. And can I just encourage you all to pick up a copy of the case study of the Finland case. So one of the figures that we often talk about is the $1 invested in school meals results in something like a $9 return, and that's just the reality. And if you look at where does that come from, those are returns from multiple things: from learning and education, from well-being, from creating lifelong dietary good habits that avoid obesity, that avoid many of the illnesses of middle and late age. And that build human capital, build more earnings, and build more national wealth. And those are just the benefits of the sort of human capital side of investing in our young people. There are also other direct benefits: creating new jobs, stimulating local markets, particularly in the agricultural sector. And I think Carmen, I feel one of the messages we heard during the School Meals Coalition Week just a week ago from Michael Kramer, the 2019 winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics. Michael has been working in Kenya for a very long time. In fact, he was a teacher as a young man in Kenya, and he's been working with your programs in Western Kenya for more than 20 years. The follow-up on those programs shows that the young people who benefited from school health programs in Busia 20 years ago, they were children then, they're adults now, their earnings now are 10% higher than those who didn't benefit, living in the same community. And Michael made the point, which I think is really, really very cogent, that the tax on those earnings alone is sufficient to pay for that program. So this is an extraordinarily good investment, and the case is well made. But we're continuing to follow up on that case.
Thank you for that. Now, I have a question for you. We get this a lot from some of the donors and partners that we're asking to step into this space. So here comes a few tough questions. One is, why feed all the children? Why feed better off children and also the most vulnerable children? What is the case for universal approaches like the one that Finland has shown and that many countries are aspiring to? So that's one issue that we get. And the other one, why should these programs be prioritized when we have so many other investments to make in education and in other sectors? What do you think about that?
Yeah, they are tough questions, and I think that they're questions many of us have asked ourselves perhaps, or have had been asked of us. So let me take the first one. The provision of free, compulsory, and universal education is one of the few things that the world agrees is a global good. Countries all over the world insist that their children go to school, that they get a free education, and that it's provided by the public sector, by the state. And yet, what we see is that being educated, and frankly, all of those of us who are parents know this quite intuitively, but also by our observations, if the learner isn't fit and well, if the well-being of the learner is in question, or if the learner hasn't grown and had the opportunity to develop her or his brain fully, then all that education being provided is a waste of time. That you can only be educated if you're able to learn. And that the more we look at the reality of this situation, it's very clear that these are simply two sides of the same coin. That unless a child is ready to learn, they're not going to be able to take the benefit from education. So it's in the country's interest, if we accept everything I said previously about the value of human capital, and remember, for rich countries, the human capital, the human population generates 70 or 80% of the wealth of our nations, but only 30 or 40% of the wealth of poor nations. If we accept all that, then it clearly is in our interest, it is in the nation's interest to make sure the children are ready and able to learn. So investing in the children, whether they're the children of rich or financially straitened parents, it still makes good sense for the nation to make sure that those children benefit from the education they're being provided free. So that's your first question. Your second one was about the financing of programs, I think. So Carmen, let me answer that one by saying that I think for many of us, we're quite surprised when we discover how school meals programs are financed. More than 90% of the cost of the world's school meals programs is met from domestic funds, not from external funds, from domestic funds. You've probably all heard the figure that we think that global school meals is an industry of around $43 billion a year, $43 billion a year. And if we look at the excellent data provided by Lisbeth Steer's new team, the Sustainable Financing Initiative, we can see that the current level of external resources is around 300 million. 300 million, that's to say 0.3 billion. 43 billion, 0.3 billion. The amount of external money is really very small. So the reality of what's going on is this. It is that the nations are supporting these programs, that the programs the 400 million children that we saw being fed before the pandemic worldwide, 1 in 2 of all primary school children, those children were being fed by funds provided by the nation. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are we talking about here with the external resources? There is a need for external resources, and the work that the Sustainable Financing Initiative is focusing on those low-income countries with restricted fiscal space that really do need help, and also, of course, on reaching the 73 million most vulnerable children that are still unreached. And sadly, I'm sure, Lisbeth, we're going to find it's more than 73 million today with all of the problems that have invested the world. But the big job for the research on the research consortium side is that we need to focus on helping identify the most cost-effective ways for countries to put in place their programs. With hundreds of millions fed, then the benefits of optimizing costs become very important. And secondly, and most importantly, on helping countries transition, particularly low-income countries, to transition from reliance on external funds to self-reliance, which is, and that's, I mean, this is really, I think, the big take-home message. The programs we're talking about are programs that are supported by the nations themselves.
Thank you so much for framing the discussion so well, Professor Bundy. We'll count on your participation for the rest of the meeting. I now want to talk and invite the governments of Rwanda and Honduras to tell us a little bit about what they're doing. I want to say both Honduras and Rwanda joined the coalition very early on in 2021. And both presidents and the ministers here have been leading examples of what can be achieved if the right political will and the right conditions align. So I really want to welcome Minister Twagirayezu to be with us today. And to get us started, can you talk a little bit about the Rwandan experience? And I want to share with everybody, Rwanda has massively scaled up their program in the last year and a half. Rwanda has gone from feeding 600,000 children to 3.8 million children today. It's one of the biggest success stories in Africa at the moment. And I want to ask you to start with, Minister Gaspar, why did the government decide to make such a big jump, both budgetary commitment and also implementation commitment? Why is this program so important for President Kagame?
Thank you very much, Carmen, and thank you to the government of Finland for the warm welcome and the hospitality. So the answer to your question, I think this is something that you have been discussing this morning, how investing in school meals is such a good investment. And in Rwanda, we consider our human capital as our only principal asset, and this is why we have been ramping up investments in education and health, and to make sure that our people are healthy and able to support our ambitions as the government. We have been having a discussion on how do we improve our human capital, and of course, when you are into that discussion, education is the first thing that you talk about, right? So, and from the discussion this morning, there is only so much you can do to teach someone if they are not fed, if they are hungry. So this is why school meals has been an integral part of that discussion on how to improve our human capital. So we have been having this discussion as government, and then a decision was taken to expand our school feeding program. And as you said, Carmen, this program has increased, and the beneficiaries increased from 700,000 to now 3.8 million kids. And this also has been has attracted increase in spending. For instance, if I give you the numbers, we have increased our budget from 80 million when we were feeding around 700,000 children to $35 million in 2020 when the program expanded. And then the budget has increased to $43 million in 2021. In this financial year, to cater for food increases and costs, but also to cater for to reduce the money that the parents are asked to contribute. The budget now is going to increase to $78 million. So, and for this year, for instance, alone, we have decreased the contribution by parents in the primary schools to less than $1 every 3 months. So, and this is to make sure that every child that comes to school is able to have a meal. And we have been, of course, looking at different ways we can sustain this program, especially in terms of being able to fund the program, to make sure that the meals are reach everyone, but also make sure that the meals are nutritious and helpful to all the children. So we have also been building governance systems around school feeding program. We have governance systems from the national to the school level, and this is to make sure that all the stakeholders are involved and they are contributing. And we have also built operational guidelines around the school feeding program, and thank the World Food Program for being an integral part of that program. And we have also been making sure that all the different partners come on board, because again, if you are talking about school feeding program, this goes beyond the education system itself. So this is why we have been involving the partners from the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Commerce, but also to make sure that the school meals programs is also impacting communities, because most of the food and most of these commodities that we buy come from the community. So we have also been seeing how the expansion of this program also benefits different communities around. So to summarize, again, I think this is an investment in the human capital. And we need to make sure that this program is sustainable and reaches as many children as possible. Because again, if you think about it, it's the principal investment that you can make in education, because other classic discussions around in education, around teachers, teaching and learning materials, all these things cannot work if children are not well, if children are not well fed in schools.
Thank you so much for that. I want to turn to Honduras now. Minister Cardona, thank you for joining us. Honduras just recovering from a hurricane, so we're very honored that you're here with us today. And we had a conversation, really interesting conversation in Colombia a few months ago, when you were telling me about the efforts of the government recovering from a period of political instability, of a lot of upheaval in the country, now with the new government of President Xiomara Castro on board. You were telling me that the school meals program is such an important pillar of that recovery strategy of the government. Tell us a little bit what you told me in Colombia. Why is this program so important in the context of Honduras as you recover?
So good morning and thank you for being here. Gracias al Programa Mundial de Alimentos y al Gobierno de Finlandia por darnos este recibimiento y permitirnos ser parte de esta coalición mundial para la alimentación escolar. En efecto, Carmen, ha sido un trabajo enorme el que se ha hecho desde que asumimos el nuevo gobierno de Honduras y el retorno a la democracia, un gobierno marcado por algunos hechos históricos, como el ser la primera mujer presidenta en la historia del país en 200 años. Una de las cosas que discutíamos cuando iniciábamos el gobierno el 28 de enero de este año fue cómo vamos a hacer para retornar a la democracia y cómo vamos a hacer para que la gente vuelva a creer en la institucionalidad pública. Y nos topamos con una realidad terrible, 12 años de gobiernos autoritarios, de lo que nosotros denominamos la narcodictadura. Destruyeron por completo la protección social y los abordajes que se hacían a los grupos vulnerables. Teníamos 3 años de no estar dando una merienda escolar integral en todo el país y la pandemia, obviamente, nuestra cuarentena fue una de las más largas del mundo, más de 2 años, en los que 2.2 millones de niños no fueron a la escuela. Y esto era un enorme reto. En 12 años no se construyó ni se reparó ni una sola escuela en Honduras. Tenemos 12.000 escuelas en ruinas totalmente. Entonces el reto era cómo hacer que los niños vuelvan a la escuela. Y la presidenta Xiomara Castro dijo, hay que darles merienda escolar, perdón. Iniciamos las pláticas con el Programa Mundial de Alimentos y podemos venir aquí hoy a decirles que hemos logrado cubrir 262 de 298 municipios en todo el país, en 16 departamentos de 18 que tiene Honduras. Hemos logrado abarcar más de 20.000 centros educativos y se priorizó la educación preescolar y la educación básica, que es del 1º a 9º grados. Hay 19.516 centros con ración completa y 100% de ellos con fondos del gobierno. Hemos invertido $30 millones para darle de comer a 1.3 millones de niños, 1.325.000 niños y niñas. También estamos en la construcción de una política de alimentación escolar con asistencia de la FAO y estamos también viendo cómo logramos la universalización antes que termine nuestro gobierno dentro de 3 años. Estamos contra el reloj en una batalla que nos ha costado mucho por el hecho de que el primer año siempre es el más difícil y luego de venir de una etapa de mucho autoritarismo y de abandono de la protección social, ir y poner un plato de comida en la mesa de cada niño en las escuelas en todo Honduras era un enorme reto que asumimos. Tenemos 2 departamentos que no están conectados por tierra al país. Uno es el departamento insular de las Islas de la Bahía y el otro es el departamento de Gracias a Dios, que es la famosa Mosquitia hondureña, una selva tropical gigantesca. Y esos fueron los 2 primeros departamentos cubiertos por primera vez en la historia del país y desde que existe el programa de merienda escolar en 1998. Y la gente se fue empoderando en estos meses, apenas llevamos 8 meses, 9 meses, la gente se fue empoderando de la merienda, de manera que hace 2 semanas mi país fue golpeado por el huracán Julia, un huracán que golpeó fuertemente la costa norte del país. Y una de las opciones que se plantearon en la mesa fue utilizar la existencia de la comida que existía para la merienda escolar en las escuelas en la emergencia del huracán, y los padres de familia en todas las zonas afectadas inmediatamente alzaron la voz en alarma diciendo: no toquen la comida de los niños, porque gracias a la merienda escolar pues hemos logrado que nuestros niños vuelvan a la escuela y que se sientan seguros asistiendo a clases todos los días. Vamos a pasar esta emergencia, va a bajar el agua, va a bajar la inundación, pero la comida debe seguir ahí porque los niños la necesitan. Ese nivel de protección, ese nivel de prestigio que la gente le está dando y de confianza que la gente está poniendo en la merienda nos habla mucho, no solo de la enorme vulnerabilidad que tenemos como país, sino también del enorme compromiso que debemos adquirir para que este programa no solo sea un éxito a nivel sostenible, sino que también sea un programa, digamos, que pueda mantenerse hasta llegar y lograr la universalidad en todo el territorio nacional. La meta es llegar de este 1.325.000 niños que tenemos hasta los 2.2 millones en total que tiene el Sistema Educativo Nacional Público de Honduras.
Mil gracias y felicitaciones por ese enorme trabajo en muy pocos meses del nuevo gobierno. Claramente están en un buen camino hacia cumplir las metas que se han propuesto y por eso invitamos a Honduras a continuar en ese camino. The two examples that we've heard now are just a few of some of the success stories that we're seeing in the School Meals Coalition, both high-income, middle-income, lower middle-income countries that are stepping up from their own resources. We've just heard something like $70 million from Rwanda, $30 million in Honduras, really ambitious goals that have been set. And we have similar success stories in Asia. So one of the main messages of this first conversation that we're having is that some of the principles that Professor Bundy set out for us at the very beginning of the conversation are actually happening now. Since last year, in the last year and a half, we've seen huge progress. Executive Director, you've traveled quite a bit. You are more outside of Rome than you are with us in Rome most of the time, visiting our programs, but also talking to leaders. Do you want to react a little bit from this discussion so far, what we've heard from Honduras, what we've heard from Rwanda, in terms of what you've seen and what leaders are telling you about why these programs are important?
Oh, Carmen, I think it's obvious when you hear these stories and listen to Professor Bundy. I mean, the anecdotal evidence, which really just substantiates what the experiential data coming from studies show, that when you invest, you have tremendous successes. And hearing from Rwanda and hearing from Honduras, and I think, Ann, the discussions we've seen in Norway and around the world, when we step up and what Benin's doing right now, we could go on and on. You know, I saw it firsthand from personal experience, and I live and lived in one of the poorest areas of the United States. And we had school meals growing up. I can tell you so many U.S. senators that will tell you back in the 50s and the 60s, if it were not for those school meals, I've had presidents and prime ministers from countries in Asia say, if it were not for those school meals, these types of anecdotal experiences that shape the future a nation. And I'll have a lot more to say a little bit later, but it's exciting to see what's happened in just the past year or two. I remember, of course you remember, I think it was, 3-4 years ago when I made the decision that we are going to, I mean, the World Food Program is a huge operation. We're now, $12, $13 billion operation. But we knew, in spite of all the emergencies that we were facing around the world, we've got to give extraordinary attention to school meals. And so we then created a special division that would hopefully inspire, encourage opportunities around the world. And now to see fruition of the first ministerial meeting, hear stories from Rwanda, hear stories from Honduras, and other stories that are unfolding as we speak around the world is really, really exciting. But what's more exciting is these children are getting healthy, good meals now, and it's changing the future. You won't see that up front in terms of a GDP impact, but you will over the long haul. And that's hard in today's political environment where, you know, the news media is all about a tweet of the day, a 24-hour news cycle. Well, this takes an investment over a long period, and the return is beyond anything that we can imagine. And the fact that we can imagine it with anecdotal evidence, Professor, thank you so much for these insights, because it's so crystal clear. People like me who like to bring it up to a whole other level, but I can't do it if I don't stand on good data that great leaders like you provide. So thank you. Carmen, back to you.
Thank you so much for that. We have two more country discussions to come to the floor now. And again, this is really illustrating some of the progress that's happening around the world. And we have Kenya and Guatemala joining us as well. Kenya, I have to say, is one of the proudest collaborations that the World Food Program has, because it's one of the countries in Africa that completed the transition towards self-reliance. We started through the World Food Program the support to Kenyan school meals way back in the early 1990s of something. And we had been supporting the government for a very long time. And in the mid-2000s, we started a partnership with USDA through the McGovern-Dole program. But really, it was a process, a transition process with the government, so that we could complete what you're hearing now from Rwanda and Honduras and other countries. We could help the government really take ownership of that national program and graduate from international support. That happened in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And Kenya is one of the big success stories, also a very important leader and member of the coalition. So can you tell us a little bit about the story in Kenya? What is happening there? How many children are being supported? What are the plans of the government, the newly appointed and operating government of Kenya? Over to you.
Thank you so much for the invite and for the opportunity as Kenya to give a presentation on school meal program. I want to say that in our country, a school meal program is a pet to the current government and even to the past government. Most of the focus has been given on the theme, and we are really so much glad because we did the transition from WFP. The school meal program started way back in 1980. At that particular time, we had a population of 240,000 learners that were experiencing, enjoying the school meal programs. And then in the year 2003, when a government came in over the late His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, we got the free primary education. And with the free primary education, a lot of learners came to school. So we had a population like around 1.2 million learners who are to be fed. And during that period, we also realized that as a country, we really must make a way and think of the future of our nation on how we are going to move forward with the issue of providing meals to our learners. We looked at it and said that indeed, there is no nation that grows without a solid foundation of the capital, the human capital, as a solid source of posterity. And the government took the initiative to ensure that they take over the school meal program from WFP. Of course, we've done it in stages. In the year 2009, we had 540. In the year 2013, 203, we had 1.2. And our projection currently, we have 2.2 learners who are on school meal programs. We project that in the next coming 3 years, we should have 6 million learners. The total learners at the current public primary schools runs at 8.5. And therefore, when we look at having 6.3 benefiting from school meal program, we look at it as a big success. The reason being, we are not only looking at the government, though currently the government has taken full responsibility. We have it in our constitution. We have it also in our policy. We did develop the policy after getting into the coalition in the year 2021. We have also done the history of school meal program, and all those are have entrenched and given solidarity to the school meal programs that we have in the nation. We also have our Vision 2030. It's also much engraved into it. So the focus is how we are going to sustain and to maintain. Just last week, when the new government took over, one of the issues that they discussed in Parliament was how to sustain the school meal program. And what they had agreed on the executive order is that the school meal program is the way to go, and they need to support it. And they've now added, initially we were operating with 20 million to feed the learners. Currently, the budget that has been passed to do the same, it has doubled now to 40 million USD in order to ensure the sustainability of the school meal program. Kenya is a very unique and a very funny country where we have diverse. Currently, you've seen a lot of issues of drought in the country. And when there is drought, there are other parts, the arid parts of Kenya, where learners will not go to school unless there is school meals. And therefore, one of the greatest initiatives that Kenya has to ensure that is in place is food at the school level. And the school has to ensure that they feed the learners. We've also gone a step higher. Initially, we used to give the cereals, the pulses, the oil, and the salt. But now we have also added into the program the blend corn soya porridge for all the learners in arid and semi-arid areas, and all in the informal settlement in the country. So this one also totals about 1.3 million learners who are benefiting from the same, from the lower level, the pre-primary level, and also grade 1 to 3 learners in those areas. So the government has taken it very seriously, and the budget for it is undisputed and is something that is undebated for, because it's anchored into our policy, it's also anchored into our constitution, it's also anchored into our Vision 2030. And therefore, the sustainability of the same is very much assured. We also have a lot of great support that we have received from WFP. Though the government gives the finances, but without the technical assistance from WFP, it would have also been a bit challenging for the issues of governance. For example, right now, we have automated the process of the procurement of the food and the accountability of M&E in our institution of the food, courtesy of WFP. We also have partners who work with us, and that is why we are talking of 6 million. For example, one of our partners is presented here, Food for Education, that is also feeding the number of learners in the school. We also have the community-based, where the schools come together, the parents come together, get food to school, those in the high potential areas, and the learners get hot meals in the day. So Kenya, we are focused, and we are not only looking at the 6 million that we are projecting, but our focus is 10 million learners, and that would have covered nationally all our learners in our public primary schools. Thank you. If there is anything, I'm with my colleague. Maybe she can also put some words if I've left anything. Florence.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing with us the Kenyan journey. It's one of those examples of a country that has evolved quite a bit, and the impressive ambition that you have is really important. The numbers that we've heard, 40 million, 70 million, 40 million, you know, these are serious investments that go to that $40 billion global industry that Don was mentioning. So it's not small peanuts. It's quite an important government commitment. One of the things we haven't discussed much with the three of you is the connection to local purchase and the homegrown school feeding element to these programs. I know that in all three of the countries that we've heard, part of the motivation, but also the architecture of the programs is that the food is procured locally. So before, we're going to hear from Guatemala just now as we bring in the experience of Guatemala, but I just want to maybe give you a few minutes to think about, if you want to interject from Kenya or Honduras or Rwanda, just if you want to tell us a little bit about what the connection with agriculture and local agriculture is, and the smallholder farmer dimension. But let's go to Guatemala now, the fourth country on the table, and another really important experience here. So Director General Palomo, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Guatemala investment, what's happening in the country, and as I mentioned, if you have any specifics also on the local purchase side and the connection to local agriculture, we would love to hear that as well.
Buenos días, mucho gusto. En Guatemala es importante resaltar que durante la pandemia de la COVID-19, como iniciativa del señor presidente, doctor Alejandro Yamatei, la señora ministra de Educación, doctora Claudia Ruiz de Estrada, hizo las gestiones inmediatas ante las entidades correspondientes para que el programa de alimentación escolar siguiera llegando a los estudiantes en la modalidad de raciones de alimentos, la cual se resolvió en menos de 24 horas, permitiendo así la retención de la matrícula escolar. Por lo que, de conformidad con la reforma de la Ley de Alimentación Escolar, para el año 2023 se ampliará el programa de alimentación escolar a los niveles inicial y medio, así como el aumento en el monto estipulado para los escolares de los niveles de preprimaria y primaria. Cabe destacar que el programa de alimentación escolar es un modelo ejecutado de manera descentralizado a través de las 22.882 organizaciones de padres de familia, de las cuales el 57% están presididas por mujeres. En el año 2020 se beneficiaron 2.5 millones de estudiantes, logrando para los años 2021 y 2022 ampliar la cobertura a 2.6 millones de beneficiarios. Dentro de los beneficios que tiene el programa es que permite dinamizar la economía local a través de la compra de alimentos provenientes de la agricultura familiar, incidiendo en la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional en el país. Es por ello que, por instrucciones del señor presidente, doctor Alejandro Yamatei, la señora ministra de Educación, doctora Claudia Ruiz de Estrada, se crean las escuelas técnicas de campo para la alimentación escolar. Esto dignificará a las personas interesadas en la agricultura familiar, y el Ministerio de Agricultura, Alimentación y Ganadería, MAGA, los certificará como proveedores de la agricultura familiar. Por lo tanto, siendo el programa de alimentación escolar un programa efectivo, necesita seguimiento y garantías políticas para seguir beneficiando a la población y así mejorar las condiciones de la niñez y adolescencia para generar competencias que ayuden al desarrollo del país.
Thank you so much for that, and that was perfect because we did want to bring the issue of local purchase and the example that you bring. I want to also share with you the World Bank just finalized an impact evaluation of the program in Colombia, the school meals program of the government of Colombia, and they found that 70,000 children did not drop out of school during the pandemic last year thanks to the school meals program. And one of the most important striking numbers that I found in the report was that it employs 79,000 women across the country. So it's an employment opportunity. We just heard from Guatemala. It's a similar thing that's happening in Brazil, for example, where the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, certifies and trains associations of farmers that are then certified to sell the food to the schools. So it creates a market for that food, creating a food system that's more sustainable. I wonder if Honduras or Rwanda want to tell us a little bit about that dimension of the program on the agriculture side. Minister Cardona?
Sí, claro que sí. Bueno, en el caso de Honduras, para América Latina, el Programa Mundial de Alimentos implementó un experimento que ha sido replicado ya en otros países, el de compras locales. El mecanismo de compras locales del PMA es muy exitoso en el país porque permite comprar a proveedores que son, digamos, agricultores locales. Uno de los retos que tenemos en este gobierno es, bueno, ayer la presidenta Castro estaba en Roma hablando ante la FAO como invitada especial mencionando este tema del bono tecnológico. Nuestro gobierno está dando 5 bonos productivos. El bono para los agricultores de granos básicos, que es maíz, frijol y arroz. Y está dando también un bono para los productores de café y un bono para los productores de temas pecuarios, ganadería. Entonces, uno de los saltos que queremos dar el próximo año es tratar de implementar la merienda fresca, la ración fresca. Y para eso es obviamente obligatoria la compra de productores locales, tanto de lácteos como de proteína animal como el huevo, por ejemplo. Entonces, hemos estado en pláticas con el Programa Mundial de Alimentos para aprender un poco de cómo ellos tienen este mecanismo de compras locales que es tan exitoso, porque ellos nos garantizan, si ustedes analizan y dicen, las cifras que les di en la participación anterior se lograron en 3 meses. ¿Cómo es posible que en 3 meses 30 millones de dólares ajusten para darle comida a 1.3 millones de niños, como hizo el PMA para comprar tanta comida en tan poco tiempo? Es porque ellos ya tienen un benchmarking de todos los productores locales. Entonces ahora lo que queremos es que los productores focalizados en estos bonos tecnológicos que da el gobierno puedan vender su comida, lo que están produciendo, a la merienda escolar. Y así el dinero público hace esta recuperación de la inversión dada en los productores locales. Por ejemplo, otra de las cosas que para nosotros está siendo muy importante es que el 40% de estos bonos se están dando en el mapa de la extrema pobreza de Honduras. Tenemos una focalización de 2007 aldeas en donde viven 2.5 millones de personas que son las personas en extrema pobreza en el país. Entonces, en estas zonas, el 40% de los bonos están llegando a estas zonas. Y curiosamente son las zonas donde tenemos 100% de cobertura de la merienda escolar. Entonces, si podemos hacer que las personas en extrema pobreza puedan sembrar una parcela de maíz, de frijol, de arroz, y que puedan tener una granja avícola, y que puedan tener una vaca o una cabra, y que puedan producir y darle a la merienda escolar esta comida que están produciendo y que reciban una retribución económica con dinero público, para ello vamos a lograr un éxito porque se va a hacer un círculo en el que la inversión pública está retornando y es redituable para las personas y las puede sacar de la extrema pobreza. Obviamente este reto es enorme. Y la visión que tiene la presidenta Xiomara Castro es alcanzarlo en el mediano y largo plazo, porque es la única manera en este siglo de cómo podemos hacer sustentable un modelo de alimentación escolar con dinero público y que sea realmente una inversión.
The issue of local purchase, we find, is motivating a lot of the investments in school meals, particularly in Africa, the issue of food systems, the connection to smallholder farmers. These are what's called structured demand programs. Because we know that children require a specific amount of food for a specific number of school days, this is a guaranteed market for farmers. And so what that allows us to do is to plan to support those associations, to target them with specific government investments, domestic investments on the agriculture side, so that the education dollars are also being fed back into the economy locally. Rwanda has a school meals model that's also homegrown. Any thoughts there, Minister?
Thank you very much. And I think our colleague from Honduras just talked about the local procurement system. And this is very key to ensure that the local communities are involved in the school feeding program. If you look at what is happening in Rwanda, for instance, at the beginning of this program, we made sure that we have clear guidelines that will allow schools to be able to purchase food from the local communities. And one example that we use when we are talking to head teachers and schools about this is we say that a school is more or less like a family, right? So, and if you are a head teacher of that school, then you should be able to look at what are the requirements of your school and what's grown around the school, and then be able to make a decision on what do I purchase from the local communities. And this, we think this is this makes sense because children living in an area that grows a certain type of food should get access to that type of food, right? So because what we had been seeing before is that, you know, the easy way was to just buy things in bulk and kids will have only just one type of meal. So, but with this new system, we think that there is a very good chance of being able to diversify and children have access to the local food. So, but of course, there are different considerations that we need to put in place to be able to allow the schools to make those decisions, to be able to use public money, to be able. So there are different systems that you have put in place to make sure that that decision is easy on the head teachers. So the school feeding procurement committee at each school is able to look at what's available and be able to make that decision. So, and we think that by doing that, if we are able to really support the schools to be able to do that, we will not only be able to provide adequate meals for the children, but to also grow farmers' communities around. So, and this in the end will not only be a good investment for the human capital, but also a win-win for everyone. And as you said, again, because we budget for food for the entire year, this is a more or less guaranteed market for the farmers. And you want to make sure that the school feeding program benefits also the local market.
Thank you so much for that round of country experiences. I wonder, before we go to the next piece, if our panel, our lead table here wants to intercede. You were talking yesterday about the food crisis and the fact that food systems are really not working for the majority of people around the world. These are some of the programs, some of the safety nets that are so important in the context of the crisis that we're living in. I wonder, ED, Minister Skinari, Monsieur de Chevalier, I don't know if you have a few comments as we close this first country discussion.
Yeah, let me add here. I just sent President Kagame a text. He and I communicate quite often about his country and his love for children, and just telling him thank you. It's amazing to see what Rwanda's done in the last few months. I was in Kenya meeting with Kenyatta right after the election, and then I met with Ruto, whose daughter has been to my farm and in South Carolina, and Ruto and I spent actually quite a bit of time talking about the investment that's necessary moving forward in Kenya. That was 8 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, I was in Guatemala, meeting with the president. I attended and visited several different school meals, schools throughout Guatemala. And I had my wife with me in Guatemala, and we both served at this particular school. And it was quite an experience, and you see it happening, and you feel it, the excitement of what's taking place. And it's extremely important right now, and particularly homegrown school meals, that when I came here at the World Food Program, we primarily were buying food and sending food into countries. We're a multi-billion-dollar operation, but now we're so diverse, from cash-based operations to homegrown school meals, and we're now trying to create economic opportunity in the local communities. We're now buying billions of dollars worth of food, et cetera, in goods and services, for example, in Africa alone. And instead of bringing food from the outside to particularly like home for school meals, now we are working with the local smallholder farmers, working with the local government, working with the national government. How do we take advantage of empowering particularly the mothers, because the women are the key. I was speaking to a Forbes group of all billionaires about 3 weeks ago, and I said, you can go to Harvard, you can go to Yale, you can go to Princeton and learn about capitalism, but if you want to see the entrepreneurial spirit in work, in reality, go find an African woman out there in the field. It's the most inspiring thing you'll ever learn in your life, because they've got that entrepreneurial spirit. They want every dime to go to their child. They want to see strategic economic opportunity. They don't want outside support. They want to be resilient, sustainable, take care of their own children, their own communities, their own villages. And I have had mother after mother after mother tell me, Mr. Beasley, we relied on you before, but you've given us the tools. You're no longer giving us fish. You're giving us the mechanism to fish for ourselves. And it's absolutely amazing. And I've heard women tell me, before we depended on you, now I'm not only feeding my family, we are feeding the village and our school meals, and we're selling into the marketplace, and I'm now buying medicines for my children, clothes for my children. I had one woman stand there and said, and I just paid for my son's wedding. And she stood there with so much pride, but the homegrown school meals was the impetus for creating this change of thinking, because we began working with the women, particularly, and working with the smallholder farmers and creating systems, supply chain systems. And we were changing nutritional habits, because many times in many of the cultures, children eat nothing but maize, nothing but carb, carb, carb. And so when you change the habit of children eating at an early age, well, and you know what I'm talking about in Central America. Guatemala's got a lot of calories, and it's got the wrong calories. And if you change the diet of the children, then you change the future diet of the nation, and it becomes a healthier nation. Anyway, I could go on and on, because I get so fired up and I get so excited. And I'm hearing all these stories. I could tell about this story, and where I was in one little country, not little country, but this was in not Cameroon. Where was I?
Benin?
No. I'll think of it in a second. But it was in a really desolate place, and we had put down a water well system for the women. And it was just like, why don't we do this everywhere? And the women have a homegrown school meal, and it was like 5 acres. And it was so lush, so beautiful, and the men were sitting over there under the tree. Here were the women out, just working, and I was like, this is incredible. And the women were like, we take the food we grow, and we give 1/3 of it to the children at school. And the other 1/3 we give to the children to take home for night. And the other 1/3 we sell into the marketplace to buy books and pencils and things that the children need at the school. And she said, if we get another 5 acres, we're going to be able to do this, this, and this. And I was like, wow, what's so complicated about this? Why don't we scale this up, every country on the planet? Anyway, I'm sorry about that dialogue, but I get excited about it.
He's our most important champion, Minister Skinari.
Muchas gracias, Carmen. Merci beaucoup. Peut-être un petit mot en français pour vous dire que nous sommes très impressionnés par les interventions que nous avons entendues ce matin de la part de nos invités du Rwanda, du Honduras, du Guatemala, du Kenya. Je ne voudrais pas que nous ayons l'impression que dans certains pays, c'est difficile et dans certains pays, c'est facile. Je pense que apporter une alimentation à l'école pour tous les enfants, c'est un défi considérable partout. C'est vrai en France, par exemple. Il est vrai que comme en Finlande, nous avons une longue histoire de restauration scolaire en France, mais aujourd'hui, nous sommes aussi confrontés à des défis nouveaux. Par exemple, nous nous sommes rendus compte qu'un des gros problèmes pour les enfants à l'école, c'est que beaucoup d'entre eux ne prennent pas de petit déjeuner. They don't have breakfast. Et ça, c'est un phénomène nouveau en France. Donc, nous sommes en train de créer de nouveaux programmes pour apporter des petits déjeuners gratuits pour les familles qui en ont le plus besoin. Et ça, ce sont de nouvelles initiatives pour nous. Un autre problème auquel nous sommes confrontés en France, c'est l'accroissement des inégalités. Et donc, il y a beaucoup de familles qui ne peuvent pas payer la cantine scolaire, même quand le repas est à 5 € ou 6 €. Parce qu'en France, ce n'est pas gratuit, ce n'est pas comme en Finlande. Nous avons des repas qui sont subventionnés, mais ça coûte 5 € ou 6 €. Mais 5 € ou 6 €, c'est trop cher pour des dizaines de milliers de familles. Donc nous sommes en train aussi de créer de nouveaux programmes pour que les repas pour le déjeuner soient à 1 €. Mais tout ça, c'est nouveau. Et on a besoin aussi de l'expertise, de votre expertise pour faire ça. De même que ce qu'on appelle les circuits courts, donc utiliser l'agriculture locale, ça aussi, c'est un défi nouveau. Et on voudrait, par exemple, que 20% des repas servis dans les écoles viennent de l'agriculture biologique. Ça aussi, ce sont de nouveaux défis. Voilà, donc c'est très intéressant de savoir que pour tous nos pays, nous avons aujourd'hui tous ces combats à mener. Et évidemment, on veut aussi nous profiter de l'expertise de la coalition pour avancer. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you so much so far. It's been very impressive morning, and I just want to say something from my side, that I really enjoyed to listen to your best practices and how you have gone further as far as school meals. But some points I really want to make concerns the local opportunities, the local jobs, how we co-create as far as the coalition, and how we create at the local level. And my point goes, of course, to the industrial jobs, service jobs, women, girls, everything what the local community can create together. And to our experience, of course, the local commitment is the key. And therefore, I emphasize the fact that, for instance, the public procurements, the public procurement law, the dimensions, whether we talk about social dimension, economical dimension, environmental dimension, it's all doable, it's all there, but you need the local commitment. And of course, in Finland, of course, the kitchen is the very key. The kitchen, how you define it, how you make it, logistics, everything, price, quality relation, everything. But of course, at the end of the day, it's a matter of the local commitment of the municipality, the role of the government. So what we have learned, it's so important that we really get all these dimensions together and the legislative aspect as well. But there must be also some flexibility in place. And of course, the local budgetary commitment. And therefore, I really appreciate the experiences you have given today. And I really believe that we can create jobs, we can create new opportunities for the local people by implementing the school meals systems throughout the world.
Well, thank you so much for that. And one of the things we wanted to make sure was coming across in this first morning was the power of the conversation that we initiated last year in the context of the Food System Summit, the coalition, and the commitments that governments have made as a result of that participation in the coalition. The movements in Honduras, the investments in Rwanda, the national policy that came out recently from Kenya, the movement that we've seen in Guatemala and others. France itself made some really impressive domestic commitments, as you mentioned, as well as the cooperation internationally. And it mirrors, so what you've heard this morning from some of the country examples is something that we already knew, but not until the coalition came on board became evident. Dawn and I have been collaborating on school meals for a very, very long time. And one of the first things that we discovered many years ago was that every country in the world in one way or another is trying to feed its school children. And that was a really important realization because coming from the World Food Program, this was sort of seen internationally as our pet project, you know, a little charity project that the United Nations, specifically WFP, was doing there on the margins. Actually, no, this is a massive policy area. It's a huge area of government investment. It brings together different sectors. It has ramifications beyond education into job creation, into local markets, value chains, and we haven't even started to discuss the new frontier, which is climate and energy, and how these programs can really be transformative in helping communities towards greener food systems, towards greener energy locally, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about that. I want to also mention that this meeting has representations from several sectors. We have education, we have social development, we have climate change, we have agriculture around the table, foundations that are supporting food system investments, the financing aspect of the conversation, and that was on purpose, inviting you all to the table to say this is really a cross-sectoral platform. It's cross-cutting through transforming education, transforming food systems, reaching towards transforming greener energy and food systems and more sustainable approaches to this. The challenge, of course, is to act multi-sectorally, and that's one of the problems. It's one of the beauties and values of this conversation, but also where we sometimes get stuck when it comes to governance at the local level, where it's just the Ministry of Education or just the Ministry of Social Inclusion. Even at the donor level, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Some of the challenges in the donor landscape are on inefficient siloing of that conversation, but that's a little bit later on. As we move forward, I'm super excited to invite Cristina Duarte. Cristina, former Minister of Finance of Cape Verde, so she's acutely aware of the investment trade-offs that we've been discussing this morning and why, from the Cape Verde perspective, this was so important. But now she's Under Secretary General and also Special Advisor of the Secretary General for Africa. I have to say, Cristina gets as excited as our Executive Director talking about this topic, so I'm very interested to hear your reactions from this conversation, and we'll have a little bit of back and forth. So, you know, you've been talking all around the world about school meals. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts.
Good morning. What an energizing conversation. It's amazing. And it's a pleasure, it's a real pleasure to be part of this team. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. All protocols observed. Allow me to stress a couple of points, Carmen, but also allow me to take this opportunity to deliver what I believe it's an important narrative from an African standpoint, because we are in a very delicate situation in Africa. The Secretary General challenged the whole UN system to break business as usual when addressing, let's say, recovering forward better. It basically told to everybody in the UN system, business as usual will lead us to failure. From an African standpoint, how, and the office that supports me, how we process this challenge from the Secretary General, and this remembers our conversation yesterday. From an African standpoint, to recover forward better, will require it to break three paradoxes. And we need to build this common ground. So basically, I will mention the three paradoxes that needs to be broken, and more than that, more important than that, the potential role of school feeding in breaking these three paradoxes. So starting for the three paradoxes, Africa has been trapped in three paradoxes: finance, food systems, and energy. Why I say paradoxes? Very simple. Finance, Africa is rich in financial resources, but trapped in debt reliefs and debt suspensions. Just allow me to put a figure on the table. $88 billion in illicit financial flows. $70 billion in efficient public spending. Second paradox, energy. We have all energy sources that we can imagine. We are a dark continent. I've been giving this figure in all my meetings because I need to mobilize people towards the need to power Africa using the United States, let's say, slogan. In 2019, Africa's electricity consumption, the whole continent, was equal to the consumption of electricity of France and Germany. We are a dark continent. Third, food systems. We have everything that you can imagine. But Africa lives or has been living under a chronic food insecurity. So, to make things work, in the path of addressing this paradox, we have a couple of bumps. And one of them is instability. Instability has been growing in Africa. Everybody knows in this room. The question is, these are the challenges, these are the paradoxes. Now allow me to ask, what is the potential role of school feeding, as such basic program, as such plain vanilla program, to address these paradoxes? And I would like basically to stress three items in terms of the potential role of school feeding. First, school feeding is much more than a hot meal for a child in a school. Much more. School feeding, as I used to say, is a hot meal for a child, is a hot meal for the mother of that child, and is a hot meal for the community that, let's say, receives that mother and that child. So, and I believe that we reach a point that trying to scale up school feeding to roll out in a massive way, at least in Africa, we need to amplify the concept of school meal, at least from a policy making. And going beyond education, going beyond nutrition, and going beyond that specific child that receives the meal. So, particularly when we mention homegrown school feeding. School feeding can be approached from a policy making as an entry point to deliver social and economic development. And I just take the interventions that have been done here. So using school feed as a sort of hub, I think was the WFP director that mentioned the need to involve communities in the co-management and co-creation in the school feeding program. As a policymaker that I have been for more than 25 years, my first reaction is, but if I involve the community in the co-management, co-creation model for school feeding, I might have at the same time a solution for energy. Because as we speak, all the technical and technological solutions to provide energy to a remote village exist, off-grid solutions. What is missing? A management and business model. Once you put the equipment, who is going to manage? Maybe we can leverage school feeding co-management approach and squeeze energy, for example. So, and this is the hub concept. The second idea that I'd like to bring, more based on my experience as Minister of Finance and Planning, is that school feeding is not charity. It's not. School feeding is one of the most efficient macroeconomic too. And allow me to remind a figure I believe was said here by Professor. The rate of return, 1 to 9. For each dollar, you got $9 of return. This is a dream for any Minister of Finance, particularly when this Minister of Finance, they are supposed to address the $70 billion in efficient public spending in Africa. So when you are given this type of solutions, these cost-efficient solutions, Minister of Finance does just jump. The third one is related to Nexus, peace, security, and development, and the potential role of school feeding. School feeding can be considered an entry point to provide, to bring stability through development in the Nexus, peace, security, and development. And this is becoming crucial, particularly in some areas in Africa, in the Sahel zone, where there is a strong need to block the advancement of non-state actors. So school feeding can also, school feeding has this peace and security stability dimension in some fragile contexts. The last one is regarding the financing. In the short term, taking account the very short or very little fiscal space that most of the African countries face as a challenge today, to scale it up, we need external financing. There is no alternative in the case of Africa. But please, at the same time that we scale it up in a massive way, school feeding, mobilizing external finance, I do believe at the same time, we need to start working on the medium and long-term solutions, so that in a 10-year time frame, budget revenues take over school feeding programs. What means we need, in the same day, invest in making domestic resource mobilizations strong country systems, so budget revenues are able to take over. We did that in Cape Verde in 2010 in the middle of international crisis. WFP just told me, I'm sorry, you have been graduated to a middle-income country. So we are going to withdraw. In the middle of an international crisis, yes. I went to Rome, begging, please don't leave me. I said, no, you are a middle-income country. I went back, and basically what we did, I gathered every penny in my budget. Do you know, budgets by definition have fat, by definition. So, and I managed to replace a program that was fully financed by World Food Program, in the following year was fully financed by budget revenues. And I believe this is the only way to bring sustainability to school feeding. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you so much. I think we want to clap. One follow-up question, Christina. You've been talking to leaders around the world about this issue, about scaling up school meals. The next session after the coffee break is going to be about this financing issue. We, in the research and the analysis that we've done with the help of the Research Consortium and other partners, as Don was mentioning, 98% of the costs of these programs globally are covered by domestic budgets. So the international community is essentially providing about 2% of that global landscape is international funding. The problem is that when we zero in on low-income countries, obviously that's where that money goes. In low-income countries, about 20% of that cost is covered by government local budgets. 80% of that is a large dependence on donors. So from a Minister of Finance perspective, but also connecting to the next session that we will have, how do we focus on low-income countries? You've been talking to the European Parliament also around debt and the debt crisis in Africa. We're talking about countries that have very low fiscal space. So what do we do about what's required for low-income countries to be able to do what we've seen in lower middle-income countries, and middle-income countries, and high-income countries? Because the issue is all of those countries have sorted it out, more or less. They're moving. Low-income countries where the most vulnerable children are living are the ones that need the most support and the ones that are getting the least amount of support. So what do we do? Help us pave the way for the next session, please, before the coffee break.
Thank you, Carmen. Your question basically is a question that calls for the macroeconomic dimension of school feeding as a tool. In the short term, these low-income countries that are only able to finance 20% of school feeding programs are countries that I'm sure some of them have millions of inefficient public spending and have millions of illicit financial flows. So in the short term, as you mentioned, those countries, they need external financing. But here you have a win-win opportunity because that specific country partners face ODA effectiveness. We have been debating ODA effectiveness in the past 30 years. Are you going to debate for the next 30 years? No. So school feeding provides, again, another byproduct. Allow me to use my financial language, my apologies. Another byproduct is an opportunity for donor countries to increase the effectiveness of ODA. Because by putting money in school feeding, they are helping that country first to enlarge domestic market, to bring communities to the domestic market. When you bring vulnerable people to the domestic market, you start a monetization process of that community. When you start a monetization process of that community, you just lay the ground for financial inclusion. And when you lay the ground for financial inclusion, you put that community in an expansion trajectory. Second, E brings private investment. I just mentioned energy, but I could mention water. I could mention other infrastructures. It brings economic diversification. And it brings, at the end of the day, which is important for the Minister of Finance, it's very nicely on balance of payments because you save international reserves because you increase your domestic production. So in the short term, external finance. But if we look at the school feeding is paving the way for a country to densify its economic fabric. And if we invest at the same time in strong DRM systems, that same country in 10 years will not be only financing 20% the school feeding, but I'm sure it will be much more than that, Carmen.
Thank you so much for that and for really framing the rest of the discussion. We have a coffee break now. We have a lot of speakers in the second session. I know that this one will probably elicit a lot of conversations during the coffee break, but we do have to ask you to be back in about 10 minutes. So if we can be back at 11 o'clock, coffee is just in the back here. If you can take it, do whatever you need to do and come back by 11, we would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming back on time. Really appreciate your support to my tough job of keeping us on time. We're going to start with the second panel, the second piece of the conversation, and Christina very nicely started us off on a very good path. And this second conversation is really about investment, both what is required to support these countries, particularly low-income countries, achieve the goals that very ambitiously we have set for the coalition, but also each country has very, very ambitious goals that they have set. But also we're going to hear from several partners that have already been supporting these transformative tools in various ways. And from a multi-sector perspective. As we did with the first panel, we're going to start the second one with a scene setter to get us going and get us started. And this is now done by Dr. Lisbeth Stier, who is here from the Education Commission. Lisbeth is the executive director of the commission, which is led by Gordon Brown. We heard from him this morning, an important champion of these efforts. But Lisbeth is also the lead in the Sustainable Financing Initiative of the Coalition. This is the second initiative of the Coalition. Lisbeth, you recently published the first landscape report on financing for these programs, and we've been discussing a little bit about this morning. What are some of the main insights coming out of that initial paper?
Great, thank you, Carmen, and thank you to everyone here. It's been absolutely inspiring to be here, and thank you, Minister Skinnari. Being here in Finland is a real honor. So yes, the Sustainable Financing Initiative is a newer initiative under the research under the School Meals Coalition, but a very important one. And why is that? The context that we are looking at is one of good and bad news. First of all, the good news is that, as we've heard this morning, commitment seems to be growing. We have 73 member states part of the coalition. We have 76 organizations who've joined this coalition, and there is this momentum building. The second thing is that we actually have some solutions around the world that are working at scale. We have pilot programs that have been scaled up in various countries. We've heard them this morning as well, often with the support of WFP. We also have that over the last 20 years, 44 countries have moved from reliance on external finance to fully financing their school meals programs by themselves from domestic funding. However, there is also bad news, and we've heard some of that this morning. Progress has not been fast enough for 60% of the lowest income countries who can absolutely not pay for school meals themselves. It is not fast enough for those 40% of low and lower middle income countries who have cut their budgets over the past few years, their education budgets, because of the pandemic. And it's also not fast enough for the 73 million children who are out there who have not been reached. And we need $5.8 billion annually to get this done. So the landscape analysis that we conducted starts to provide a little bit of a picture of the finance. And I have to say that when we embarked on this, we didn't quite realize how challenging it would be to get a correct picture. And that's partly because of this multi-sectoral nature of school feeding. But we've made an initial attempt. There are three observations I want to emphasize. The first one is that countries are, by and large, adopting strategies, school feeding strategies, and those strategies are actually multi-sectoral. They are looking at the intersection between agriculture, education, nutrition, social protection, and so on. So we do see that across countries. However, most of these strategies have no realistic costing estimates, and they have no financing plan. So on the costing estimates, what we are seeing is that we don't have a very good idea, and when we've done those estimates ourselves, we see that actually costs of school meals can be quite high if you compare them to education budgets or spending per child. So it's really important that costing estimates are being put in the context of the multi-sectoral nature of this, because costs per child can range between $40 per year to $55 a year. And that is in low-income countries sometimes what's being spent on a child for their education. So you can actually have estimates that are almost as large as the spending on education. So we need to set these costing estimates in the right context, because obviously it is about the cost of the well-being of a child, which is much larger than just the education, and obviously the benefits that come from that. And then secondly, obviously the need for these long-term, for the medium and long-term financing strategies. So the first observation is we have plans, but they're not well costed, and the financing strategy is often not there. There are exceptions, obviously we've heard them here today as well, and that is what we need to highlight. The second observation is what Christina has been pointing out so well, and that is that obviously this needs to come from domestic revenue, and we have seen an improvement in terms of countries taking charge of this. But as you pointed out, Carmen, the statistic of 97% or the high percentage taken on by domestic budgets is a little bit misleading when we talk about low-income countries and some lower middle-income countries, because in those countries, the percentage is much, much lower. So what we know is that in the current fiscal context, with the pressures on budgets, lower growth projections, higher food prices, the fiscal space has been shrinking, and in the short term, we will need external assistance. There is no way around that. We need to stand up as an international community and support countries. However, as you said, Christina, we need to use this as an opportunity to start building the domestic capacity to mobilize funding. And that includes general revenues, and there are examples around, many countries around the world are mobilizing general revenues for domestic, for school meals, but also more specific revenues, including earmarked taxes, energy, taxes on sort of hydrocarbon, and so on. The other point I want to make in this context is fiscal space and limited fiscal space puts a real premium on efficiency and equity. So we really need to think very hard about the costs and what can be done to lower costs. Because what we've also found in the landscape study is that the costs vary quite a bit across countries. and that some of that can be explained by food price differences, but in many cases it's mainly about efficiencies and also administration. And I was really pleased to hear about what Rwanda is doing in terms of putting a system in place to address that. Equity, what we see around the world, is a lot of different approaches with respect to how to target, because if you have less resources, you need to think more about who you're going to serve first. And there are some good models out there in terms of targeting. So the second observation is as fiscal space is shrinking, we need to find solutions, but in the short term, we need external assistance. So that gets me to my third observation, which is that external assistance. Now here, again, the data is very patchy. Unfortunately, there is no real kind of budget line or sort of line that really accurately captures external assistance. What we can capture is it's not very much. It's 300 million, as Don was referring to earlier. And what we also see is that it is dispersed over a lot of countries. So we have about 60 countries benefiting from that 300 million. The other thing we find is that there is at the moment not really a collective strategy around school meals, which is why this School Meals Coalition is so important. And that school meals, and that could be because school meals have tended to be seen as a humanitarian response issue, so there is not yet this kind of move into development. There's also obviously the cross-sectoral nature of it. And then the other piece is that, and this is the research that Don has done with his wonderful team, there has been this focus on early years and the early stages of life and much less on the sort of longer term. So all of this has led to a missing kind of strategy around school meals. But it's not all bad news. Some things are going really well. There's been wonderful examples in countries taking charge of the donors and creating strategies for donors to really support. Rwanda, again, I should commend you there on creating the National Steering Committee, but there are also other examples. And there are new ways of funding that are coming on stream for school meals as well.
Thank you so much, Lisbeth, for helping us to set the scene. We're running a little bit out of time, but I wanted to go straight into, the report has 4 or 5 recommendations. Can you very briefly go through them, also to kind of give us a little bit of homework, I think, for this meeting?
Great. So first of all, I think we need to work on this planning issue and really working together as nations and countries to come up with clear, long-term sustainable finance strategies. So that's number one. And I'm very pleased to know that Christina has also agreed to be leading the steering committee of the Sustainable Financing Initiative to support countries with that. Secondly, obviously, we need to think about these long-term financing options for countries and what are the possibilities there. It's the general increases in revenues, again, using the donor engagement to make sure that domestic resource mobilization is top of the agenda. We need to look at options out there in terms of earmark taxes, in terms of energy subsidies that could be redirected towards school feeding. So investigating based on the work with countries and the detailed work on the financial plans, looking at these options for domestic resourcing. And then the third thing is the international community. Obviously, ODA is under huge pressure. So we have more limited options there, but we really need to look at what is going to leverage those donor dollars. And there are already a couple of examples out there. One, which WFP is involved in with the Islamic Development Bank, for example, looking at the cross-sectoral nature of this. harnessing the fact that this is not just an education investment, it's a nutrition, it's these different sectors. So can we as donors create some kind of more proactive approach here that can mobilize the resources from different parts of donor budgets? And then secondly, as Mr. Brown mentioned, there are some mechanisms out there, like the International Financing Facility for Education, that could also provide very low-cost finance to countries to plug the gap in the interim. And that has also huge leverage working with the multilateral development banks. So that's the program moving forward. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you so much for helping us set the scene for this conversation. We have another part of the participants here that haven't spoken until now in the next panel. Let's start right away with Minister Vinerim. Thank you so much for coming. We know that when you took office, one of the things that you were interested in exploring and supporting was homegrown school feeding because of the connection to food systems, because of this issue of smallholder farmers. So tell us a little bit about the vision of Norway and some of the commitments that you've made.
Thank you so much, Carmen, and thank you, Lisbeth, for setting the stage. I thought that was a great point of departure for this discussion. Now, as you mentioned, Carmen, the title of this panel, School Meals as Platform for Food System Transformation, and that's really my entry point. We have this silly expression in Norway when we talk about when something is a Kinder surprise, then you get, you know, 3 things in one. You know, these eggs, right, made of chocolate. So you get chocolate, you get a surprise, you get a little toy inside. That's really what school meals is all about, and that's the entry point, I think, for leveraging and getting at least the ODA funding, because donors like Norway, we feel that we need to think even smarter when it comes to financing with ODA money, and school meals gives us nutrition, the education, but also an entry point, market opportunities for small-scale farmers, which can kickstart an economic transformation in local communities. So that's kind of my entry point into this. The holistic approach is absolutely key. And this far, I think school feeding programs has been the best example that I've come across, actually. Which gives me a great argument when I need to make the point back home why we need to put ODA funding to this. So in a few weeks' time, Norway will be presenting a new strategy on food security, and school feeding program will be an important element in that, actually, on food security. And why is that? That is because in order to transform food systems, which we know we have to do, we have to start by strengthening local production, local value chains with job creation, and we have to start with small-scale producers, small-scale farmers. And but in order to make that connection, I think we have a way to go in order to understand how school feeding program is part of that whole value chain. We, in order to get more information on that, we contracted the University of Life Sciences in Norway to look at the mutual benefits between local value chain, smallholder farming, and school feeding projects. And the result was that we actually need to do more research on those connections, but we know some things. First of all, we know that sector-specific interventions fail. We know that. So the holistic approach is absolutely key. We know that agricultural interventions, and we have some experience with that, but agricultural interventions to increase production very often fail because there is no access to local markets. So we are able to increase production, but we don't have the handoff. And school feeding programs can give us an opportunity there. And we also know that potential gains for local agricultural developments as a result of school feeding programs are often lost because the programs rely on imported or donated food. So I mean, we do it right some places, but not at all everywhere. So I think we need to address those challenges as well in our way ahead. I strongly believe in the potential of this work. So last year we entered into an agreement with WFP on locally produced school feeding in Niger, Malawi, and Ethiopia. And I'm happy to say that we are planning to scale up that with a new agreement soon. We have the plan to enter into agreement with WFP on 350 million over 5 years. So that would be approximately 33 million euro. And I think we should also strengthen the scientific outcome of that program. So that is our plan. To sum up, the irony is that in Norway we don't have school meals, unlike Finland and Sweden. My government has an ambition to get it done, but it's a really steep uphill. It takes some time, but in the meanwhile, at least I can make sure that we get some stuff done through our development policies. Thank you.
Wonderful to hear that Norway has also domestic ambitions, and I'm sure your Nordic partners are more than happy to help with know-how and sharing. All right, so thank you so much, Norway, and thank you for the support and also for the continuation and scale-up of that relationship that we started about a year ago under your leadership, Minister. Let's go to the Rockefeller Foundation now. The Rockefeller Foundation has been in partnership with WFP for quite a while now in Rwanda and Burundi. I understand we have some good news, Merdad, today. But let's just start by, can you tell us a little bit why the Rockefeller Foundation is investing in the coalition? Why are you such an important partner in this conversation now?
Thanks, Carmen, and thank you for inviting the Rockefeller Foundation to this meeting. You know, the Rockefeller Foundation has been involved in agriculture for over a century. In fact, it even helped build the agriculture extension system in the United States. But what's become very clear is that a focus on just green revolution technologies has not served us well. And everybody knows the deficiencies of the food system on nutrition, sustainability, inclusiveness, and so on. So the foundation made a specific shift towards good food that represents nutrition, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And we felt that school feeding can potentially be a powerful lever for that. If you look around the world, there are a lot of cases where institutional channels have influenced mass markets. The school milk program in Kenya basically created a culture of dairy consumption. It helped Kenya to develop a dairy industry that is relatively mature for Africa. And I think Kenya has among the highest per capita consumption of dairy products. So, and there's many examples. You look at the US military during the Second World War, they adopted fortified flour, and within a year, the whole industry in the United States shifted. So we feel there is ample evidence to show that school feeding, apart from all the wonderful economic arguments that have been made, which are all very valid, but it can also be used as a powerful market signal to the supply chain to shift. And they can shift, and they have shifted. In fact, the work that we have done in Rwanda is borrowing from the learning of Denmark. In Denmark, the government, civil society, and the private sector came together, and over a 10-year period, they shifted towards whole grain consumption. 75% increase over a decade among children. Astonishing results. The EU is actually supporting this learning in Eastern Europe now. So what we started to work with the WFP in Rwanda was to look at cereals. So maize is a significant portion of the calories that are eaten. and to see how we could engineer the menu in a budget-neutral but nutrition-positive way. The early results indicate that the shift from refined maize flour to fortified whole flour is budget neutral. It sounds too fantastic to be true, but it is. The reason is that the extraction rate from grain to flour increases from 72% to 99% when we make that shift. That margin gain pays for the miller to fortify the food. We end up with a food that is 3 times to 5 times more nutrient dense. The miller's making money, they want to expand. The children like the food. We were told no, people wouldn't accept a change in their diet. But actually, the evidence is different. 70 to 80% of children in lower middle school, in elementary school, say they preferred the fortified whole grain. 97% of grade 6 students said they preferred it. So there's no reason why we should be throwing away 20, 30% of the food from our grain and giving it to livestock. This is good human food that we can use. So I'm very pleased to see that based on this, Minister Gaspard has allowed me to say that we will be expanding in Rwanda to another 4 districts, so that's another 400,000 children. And of course, our hope is that it will not only grow in Rwanda. We're about to launch a new partnership with the World Food Programme, which will look at 6 countries. And the aim is to see how we can re-engineer menus towards what we call good food. That may mean different things in different contexts. And how we may create those sorts of incentives for the shift to happen. Clearly, the private sector needs some support. They need some technical assistance. They may need some blended finance to make those shifts. But the key is the leadership has to come from the governments. They are the ones who say what will be in their menus. If they give that market signal, the partners will be there to help the private sector to shift. We will be there to help with the public education campaign. I think it can work.
Thank you so much. And the Rockefeller Foundation is also investing, I should say, Mehrdad, you were very modest, investing in an enormous research and learning program that will go with this so that we can document and create evidence out of the new approaches that are coming up in the 6 countries that will go into the partnership. Talking about innovation and visionary partners, Dubai Cares has been one of the, well, was the first partner of the coalition. And I have to say, thanks to Tariq's partnership and leadership, it was born out of a meeting with our executive director several years ago. So thank you to both of you, actually, for starting this whole thing. And out of that conversation, Tariq, you were our first investor. You really believed in what we were trying to achieve here, and that's why we're here. I have to also give you credit for creating the research consortium. It was your initial investment that allowed Don to stand up the team that they now have in the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So first of all, thank you for believing in us and for really making all of this possible. But tell us a little bit about why you were our first investor. Why did you believe in this so early on? What's the vision of Dubai Cares?
Thank you, Carmen. There's the long version and there's the short version. No, I'll do the medium, actually. I'll do the medium. Look, first of all, I want to tell everyone that what we do is education. We do everything in education. School feeding and homegrown school feeding is just one component of quality education. And we all know the reasons behind the importance of feeding children and keep them nutritioned until they finish schooling. You know, it takes 2 crazy men, Carmen, to put things together. And it was more than a decade ago when I visited Don. I was in DC and he was working at the bank, and we were funding the bank in some nutrition programs globally, and we had a small chat on the side, and then I went back to Dubai. And then we had more meetings on the phone on why can't we start a global consortium, a global coalition in homegrown school feeding, but also school feeding. But you see, feeding is not the solution. How we see it, we tried doing feeding by itself, and it didn't work. Because we realized as much as you're feeding the child, you're actually feeding the worm at the same time. And to eliminate the worm, you need deworming programs integrated into the feeding, and it worked. But how much money are we going to pump into deworming? Pills, deworming. So the best way to eliminate the deworming program is to get the wash component into this and integrate it. And that's actually what we did with the WFP in Ethiopia. And it was an amazing program. It opened our eyes to many things. We started forming farmer cooperatives because the big farmer literally ate the small farmer alive, because the small farmer cannot go into the cities. It's the big farmer. And with these cooperatives, you stabilize prices. Farmers were complaining. We don't have money from banks to expand upon our farms. Well, we spoke, you guys spoke, the WFP to banks, and you gave them guarantees that whoever farmer defaults on payment, the WFP will ensure that the payment will be done. There were floods at that time. It was raining. So there was another fund that was created that created silos, and all the grains were stored. So when you have a rainy season, even if the crops die, you still have those silos. So a lot of learning happened there, and eventually you end up not having these deworming programs in schools, and it becomes cost effective. So that's the dream that we had, Dawn and I. The issue we had, Carmen, at that time, over 10 years ago, the education sector was not ready. They did not understand what we were talking about. My boss didn't understand what I was talking about. And I pitched 3 times for her, and she goes, do your job, do education, and we went on. But long story short, I meet David, of course, at the World Government Summit in Dubai in 2019, and he said, I want to resurrect this whole thing about school feeding. And then you came in, Carmen, and Dawn came in, and we revisited the whole idea that we had. And it had to happen. The investment had to happen. And of course, I just want to tell everyone here that we wanted our funds to be focused on an area. So we partnered alongside with the WFP, with the African Union, so we can have a proper approach on a continent that has been hit really hard when it came to malnutrition and stunting, and that was Africa. So it has 3 folds. One is the research component, which Professor Dawn Bundy is spearheading. Another is to change policies in all African countries towards embedding school feeding and homegrown school feeding and involving the farmers into the equation. And of course, we're going to have small pockets of pilots in a few countries. And that was a 4 million grant in the middle of COVID, actually. It was exactly in March 2020 when it first spread, the commitment came. But I just want to send a few messages here, Carmen. I think we're just at the beginning. I think we're just at square one. Everything that we've been doing for the past, we've been talking to each other since 2019. We had a dream since, 2012. And now things are just moving. We have France and Finland spearheading the School Meals Coalition. I don't want to be a party pooper, but the UAE is going to make an announcement that they're going to join as well in a bit. But if we don't put all our ducks in a row, if we don't have innovative financing, sustainable financing towards this approach, it's not going to work. We need donor countries, we need the private sector, we need anyone who is into food security joining this coalition to do it. We have Gordon Brown co-chairing the Global Education Forum, that one of the 4 main goals is school meals. We have the GPE into school meals. We have other facilities. We have the World Bank. We have to unite. We cannot see ourselves as competitors. We have to unite, and that's the only way it's going to work. And I am really optimistic about this gathering. I've been with the Dubai case for 13 years. I haven't seen any gathering such as this one. And Elizabeth Steer here and us, Dubai Cares, we launched just 2 weeks ago at the UN General Assembly a report, which was the Rewired Summit report. We hosted a huge education summit in Dubai last December at Expo. There was a huge segment there about innovative financing in school meals. Again, the usual suspects, Dawn and Lisbeth, were there. I was the third usual suspect. Of course, Gordon also spoke about it, and we had the private sector and governments speaking about it. And then we launched the report 2 weeks ago, and we it's a cross-sectoral approach. So we had 6 win-win solutions, and solution number 4 is about scaling school meals and school health interventions. So this is in the report. It's part of the UN. The Education Commission did the entire report, and I'm very optimistic, and we have to have more people on this table. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that and for that homework that you're giving us. Now on to the U.S. The U.S. government, and Lisbeth mentioned this, is the biggest donor on school meals globally, the only donor that has a multi-year commitment with governments sustaining these programs. I would say a lot of the success stories that we have nowadays on governments that have transitioned to self-reliance is thanks to the sustained support of the U.S. government through WFP and other NGOs. So Cindy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I also know that inside the U.S., the domestic side of the school meals panorama is changing. So tell us a little bit about that, and then a bit about USDA more broadly, your vision globally.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen. We appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I appreciate your comment regarding the recent White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. That was the first conference of its kind held in the U.S. in 50 years. And part of that conference involved President Biden unveiling a new national strategy. And I'm very pleased to share that included a really rather prominent attention paid to our domestic school meals program. Specifically, the strategy included support for a pathway to advance healthy school meals for all. As some of you may know, we do currently have an extensive nationwide national school meals program in the U.S., but it is not universal. It is a means-tested program and has been for many, many decades. And we have certainly ample evidence that the program has demonstrated, strong positive impacts on nutrition and other outcomes. We recognize that we haven't fully leveraged all that school meals have to offer as a core intervention to improve child's nutrition and fight childhood hunger. So what we are really trying to do, the vision that we have for the U.S., is to transition the program from essentially an ancillary or support model that functions in schools to really being reorienting school meals programs to being an integral component of the school day that allows schools to focus on providing the highest quality meal and helping children understand the importance of healthy food and a healthy diet to their entire lifetime. We also recognize the need to invest more in access to local and regional foods, training and equipment for schools, as well as nutrition education. So I just wanted to take a moment to share that, because I believe that vision for school meals is very much aligned with the vision that the coalition has. So turning back to your comment, Carmen, around our multi-year financing model, we're certainly proud and pleased that we are able to be the largest international school feeding donor through the McGovern-Dole program. The United States provides about $220 million per year in annual funding. And it just so happens that 2022 is the 20th anniversary of the McGovern-Dole program. So looking back on that, the program has supported over 5.5 billion meals to 31 million school-aged children in 48 countries over its 20-year history. So going to the multi-year funding approach, the program does fund each project for 4 to 5 years, and we also support multiple consecutive rounds of project funding so that the projects can build and grow upon their success over time. We really do view that this multi-year funding model is the key to the success that's been associated with the McGovern-Dole program. The notion really is that time is needed to sustain the school meals program, and the goal for McGovern-Dole is to provide enough time so that the school meals program can be sustained nationally after the U.S. funding ends. And in fact, a significant part of U.S.'s motivation for joining the coalition, the Sustainable Financing Initiative, has been to sort of share our belief in this model. I'll also note that in addition to directly supporting feeding children, McGovern-Dole's multi-sectoral funding supports a variety of complementary activities, including things like educational instruction, nutrition education, support for local and regional procurement, infrastructure improvements, community outreach, host country capacity building, and other activities. I want to really emphasize that the funding does support local communities and farmers, which are vital to the sustainability of the school feeding program, as we've heard other commenters point out. In fact, in 2018, the McGovern-Dole program was modified in order to allow for up to 10% of the funding to be used towards local and regional commodities, and that was intended to help establish the viable supply chain that is so important to support that gradual transition from donor-supported programs to nationally managed programs. Again, helping countries transition to national ownership with sustainable national financing is a critical part of the program process. And even in the process of determining which applicants are going to receive an annual award, USDA really carefully analyzes the national commitment and continues to reassess that commitment throughout the project lifecycle, while also providing technical support for budgetary policy and management throughout the project life. So let me just conclude by pointing out to a couple of examples where we feel like this model has been successful. We've seen transition to national management in places like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Kenya, and Nicaragua. Laos is another excellent example. McGovern-Dole began working there in 2006. Back in 2019, there was a successful transition of school meal activities in over 1,400 schools to the government's national school feeding program. We do still currently have active McGovern-Dole projects in Laos that are delivering meals to over 165,000 school children that are focused on the very remotest parts of the country. But we continue to work with our partners on the ground to continue the model of strengthening national and local capacity over time, including, again, continuing that advocacy for a dedicated budget line in the national budget for school funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and congratulations on that move to a universal national U.S. school lunch program.
Still some work to be done.
Yeah. You're on the right track. Okay, last speaker of this round, Charles, from the Global Partnership on Education. We met at the pre-summit of the Transforming Education Summit and decided that we needed to do much more together. Of course, Global Partnership for Education, one of the largest partners of developing countries in the education sector. And if you notice, we just had agriculture speaking, we have education, we have, again, international cooperation. So there's also an inherent multi-sectoral story happening here already. Charles, what's the plan for GPE? We need you as a partner, countries need you. How can we work better together in this multi-sectoral way?
Great. Thank you, Carmen. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you. This is such a critical issue for education. For GPE, we see education as a system, not as a sector, but as a system. And therefore, we mobilize partnerships and investment to identify the critical constraints and attack those constraints to achieve transformative education. Now, and with the intent of ensuring that no child is left behind. We work in 82 countries, and many of those countries have identified that food insecurity is a critical issue. Now, what does that mean for education? It means the child is in school and not learning because they don't have the nutrition that helps them learn. They're distracted by the fact that they're hungry. But also, we think about the over 220 million children who are not in school. And why? How can you get them to go to school? What is the incentive for parents to send them to school? So we think that as food insecurity is continuing to rise, we see school meals as being a critical and key intervention that can really support the transformation of education. Now, so what does that mean? What do we actually do? So GPE supports countries in their planning. We, on their education, developing education plans to identify those critical constraints that need to be addressed. In doing that, we encourage countries to include a multi-sectoral approach, particularly from health and nutrition, including those in their education plans, but also bringing into their discussions on education planning all the multi-sectoral partners who can bring those different perspectives into that discussion. Second, we focus on domestic finance. Not just the volume of domestic finance, but we also look at the efficiency and the equity of domestic finance. Now, if I think about the efficiency side of it alone, you're looking at our estimate is about 1/3 of education finance is inefficient. Inefficient from procurement waste, inefficient because of repetition in school and so forth. So if we can address those financing issues, we can also taking a look at the issues of fiscal space. If we can address those kinds of issues, we can help countries find that long-term sustainable finance they need for school meal programs. Third, we support countries in the sharing of evidence of good practice and in the costing of priority nutrition programs. So finally, not finally, I should say, we also invest in school meal programs. It has been, I would say, a modest investment. From 2016 to 2020, we invested $48 million in school meal programs. And in response to COVID-19, part of our emergency response, we provided another $8.6 million to countries to help them in addressing the school feeding needs that are now the children out of school, schools closed. How do you reach them and ensure that they're getting the nutrition they need during that difficult period? In the Gambia, we provided support to 100,000 children who were out of school because the schools were closed, and this complemented the work of WFP working in other districts. But finally, we are a partnership. And this is core to our DNA, is working with others. We leverage, we align the resources and the expertise of our partners to address constraints. We work with partners within the education system, and we are increasingly working with partners outside of the education system. And so building on, as Carmen and I started that conversation back in June, I'm very pleased that we're working towards an initiative, a collaboration with WFP, where we can bring together our resources and our expertise, but particularly focusing on reinforcing partner countries' capacity to manage their own national school meal programs. At the same time, finding those synergies through cross-sector collaboration. I think there are lots of other partnerships that we can develop around this table and with others. We bring to the partnerships our own innovative finance mechanisms, one in particular that leverages 3 to 1. So we put in $1, we're looking for $3 match. And so with that, we can mobilize significant resources for a partner country. So we're always looking for options, always looking for partners, and I'll give you my business card and we can keep talking. So with that, I'll stop there, Carmen, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles, and thank you to all the partners. One of the key takeaways of this session as we designed it was we wanted, as we did in the morning, to put on the table some of the real substantial investments that governments are making. There are also real substantial investments that partners are making from various sectors for this agenda. And so as you called, Tariq, for unification and an alignment in the strategy, this is where we get started, right? And there are a number of partners that are already believing in this agenda and supporting it in very catalytic and strategic ways, not just in providing funding for the programs, but also providing the architecture, the evidence, the capacity building that will be needed to move this movement forward. So, Executive Director, you've heard about investment. You like this topic as well.
Yeah.
Thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, real quick. I think critical going forward is the IFIs, World Bank, IMF, others have got to really step up. In some ways, be a little more flexible and strategic, particularly if you go be doing safety net programs, which we're substantially increasing that relationship with the World Bank right now and other IFIs, is that think about if you've got $1, how can you take that dollar and maximize that dollar? And a school meals program, it maximizes, it touches so many, pinpoints, from gender parity to you name it, it goes on. And so I've said this many, many times, if a donor will give us that dollar, us meaning working with a country in a country, and that country I was thinking about a while ago was in Chad, down south of Mongo, by the way. But give us that dollar and give us the flexibility, because we can take that dollar and do so much more. I've said to donors, if you'll give us $1 and you want us to do A, B, C, but I can also do D, E, F with it if I get the flexibility at a nominal increase in cost, and it maximizes the potential of that dollar. And so I think here, getting the World Bank, getting the IMF, getting other IFIs to step up more, and donor nations to give us more flexibility when we're on the ground working with social safety net programs, school meals programs. And Charles, what you guys doing, what you're talking about, this $1 to $3 is one of the things that I've been encouraging nations to take ownership. I mean, like what Kenya has done in taking over the ownership of programs. And I can go from how many countries that we've 44. Transitioned, 44 have transitioned. But I say, if you'll take ownership and put skin in the game, there are donors out there that were like, hey, we'll step in now, because we know there's no long-term success if you don't take ownership of your own programs. And so I remember, Cindy, when Trump got elected, and they were zeroing out a lot of the international aid parts of the budget, and one of them was McGovern-Dole. And I told one of my staffers, oh, we're worried about it. I said, trust me, don't worry about that one. They said, why? I said, believe you me, I'm going to call Bob Dole. Bob Dole will call President Trump, and McGovern-Dole will not be touched. It took like one phone call. Because everybody understood the power, the impact of McGovern-Dole as to the future. And of course, everybody loved Bob Dole. But nations around this table, thank you as you're stepping up in ways that you've never done before, because you clearly understand the power impact as we take the limited dollars you have in your ODA and international aid and make it more strategic, more effective, and how do we empower it more to do more. So back to you, Carmen.
Thank you. I wonder if any of our other two leaders, Finland, France, do you want to make any comment? You're fine? Fine. Okay. All right. So let's go to the last three speakers of this session. We haven't heard from Sierra Leone, we have Japan, and we have Iceland, really important partners and members of the coalition. Let me really welcome Sierra Leone also to the table. A very important example of government investment as well. So please, can you tell us, Deputy Minister Gogra, a little bit of the vision of Sierra Leone in about 2 minutes? We are short on time.
I want to thank you and thank all those who organized this warm-up experts meeting. I'm privileged to join you. And as a country, I want to say we have the political will, because that starts it all. Our president affirms the school feeding. In his manifesto, he said free quality education, but underlining it is the school feeding, which has made children go to school in abundance and children stay in school and learn. And he said, if I feed the children, I feed their souls, I improve their nutritional value, and they in turn will help their communities to educate them. What did we do? In 2021, we had the school feeding policy endorsed. Over the years, it has been a problem. And then we shifted towards the homegrown school feeding. And what's next? Like what we are here for, partners, WFP has been a source that we are organizing with and partnering with, and CRS, the MAC, Governor has also been helping in the interior areas. These are very hard to reach areas in Kabbalah and Falaba. And even after school or during the holidays, CRS does its best to distribute food to these areas. And they involve the local farmers, and they also do the local procurement processes. WFP has been a backbone, and they operate in a lot of areas like Pujahun, Cambia, and Koinadugu. These are areas wherein we have food insecurity and reaching down to the borders. It's very difficult for children like this to learn, but WFP has penetrated there. It was said here that women need to be involved in the education of their children and in the development of their communities. When they build up the agricultural aspects of these women, then they will be able to help their children, help the community, and improve their social well-being and their health well-being. We are here today to appreciate the good that we have joined the coalition. And it was a celebration for us. And we think we need more of this in low-income countries. We are not here at table. Just like the climate change, it affects Sierra Leone. A lot of floodings, which has made the farms produce so poor. We need improvement in this. We need the expertise. That is why we are here today. The partners have done a lot, but we need more for these children. We have 3 million children in our schools. What's next will be their future in 2023. We have done the education sector plan, and there are gaps in the financing. We shall share as we have joined the coalition, and we are ready as a country on behalf of my government to do the best we can to cooperate and to work with you people to improve the children in the world, because Sierra Leone is part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please give our regards to Minister Senge for his leadership as well. Also in the Transforming Education Summit, he was a big champion of this agenda, so please thank him for us. Ambassador Fujimura, very nice to see you. Gracias por venir. Japan is a really important partner of this agenda, also because domestically you are an example. The Japanese school meals program is one of the best in the world, very much at the par with Finland and others. So tell us a little bit about Japan's view of this agenda, of the coalition, and your cooperation.
Well, thank you very much, and muchas gracias, Dona Carmen, for your kind invitation. We are very happy to be here because Japan, like Finland, has a long tradition, long history of school meeting program. The first school lunch for children of financially difficult families is believed to be dated back to the end of 19th centuries. And legislation-wise, we have a law, the school lunch program law in 1954. And in the 21st century, we crafted a new law in 2005, Basic Act on Food Nutrition Education. The target is that children will be able to acquire knowledge on food and nutrition through school lunches and to develop their judgment in order to achieve their healthy diet for themselves and others. And to promote these school meal programs, the key word for us is homegrown school feeding. That is very important. Homegrown school feeding means utilize the locally grown produces in school feeding program. We believe that it will be good to support local smallholder farmers to make income and increase employment, as Mr. Skinner mentioned in the morning session. And also it is good for the local traditional food culture to be passed on to the next generation. Just in Japan, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture are working together to promote the utilization of the local produce in school lunch program. And it is not limited inside the country. We are trying to promote this initiative abroad. For example, in Sierra Leone, SICA, our cooperation agency, JICA, and WFP are working together. That is, Zika is providing technical assistance to smallholder farmers to increase their rice production, while WFP is trying to utilize the produced rice for the school meal programs. And as to the funding, I say that Japan will continue supporting the school feeding program implemented by WFP. And Prime Minister Fumio Kishida himself stated in a video message at the occasion of the Transforming Education Summit held in September this year that Japan will provide support for school meals. However, we are aware at the same time that it is difficult in practice to continue to provide the support for school meals needed by each developing countries only from individual donor countries. So it would be extremely beneficial to consider innovative approaches that include utilization of the funding from international financial institutions and the private sectors, as stated as an item for consideration in the initiative. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Embajador. Okay, last speaker, but a very special one for me, Ambassador Stefan Yon. I want to say to everybody, you are one of the partners, early partners, as we were cooking up the coalition last year in the conversations around the Food System Summit with Permanent Representative Satu Lassila of Finland. The two of them got together somewhere around March or something of last year and decided that we needed to do this in the context of the Food Systems Summit. And it was thanks to your support and your championship that it got off the ground. So please, first of all, thank you on behalf of all of us and on behalf of WFP for your leadership. Now from Reykjavik, you left Rome, now you're in Iceland, in Reykjavik, also championing this agenda. Tell us a little bit about your vision of where the coalition's going and some of the efforts that you're championing as well.
Well, thank you, Carmen, and thank you for your nice words. Also, I'd like to pay tribute to the Finnish government. Skinnari took leadership very early on, and then came France. And also, I want to pay tribute to WFP and yourself for having everything ready when we really needed it. The strategy which the World Food Programme had been working on was ready off the shelf to be presented to the global community, thanks to you. So when I was in Iceland growing up, we didn't have school meals, but they gave us every day a spoonful of cod liver oil. So you can imagine. But they fed us something else also, literature. So we brought our sandwiches to school, and the teacher would read us a story. And let's not forget that a school meal is also about culture and community. It's also a part of the program to bring people together around a meal. Teachers, students, the people in the community alike. It's a part of the program. But now we are here, and I am here doubling as the chair of the Aquatic and Blue Food Coalition. I'm a chair of another coalition which I helped found in Rome. And we have, and I can tell you from our group, that we want to work with your coalition, because aquatic and blue food is a very, very important component of school meals. Undervalued, underfunded, but as I saw in the Pacific when I was there in the spring, it's unbelievable to be in a small island development state, see all the fish around all the ocean, but people are eating junk food and the children are stunted because the fish is being exported, taken away. So it's also a question not of culture, but equity. Local resources should be used. So what I would like to do today is to urge the donors under the current constraints to realize that we will not reach the Sustainable Development Goals. They are out of reach as of now. We have to be brutally Nordic realistic about that. And we need to cut our losses and pick our winners, and this coalition is one of the winners. We have to redefine where our ODA money is going now, because as we heard before, it's under pressure. We will not receive a lot of more money, so we have to redefine our programs in favor of school feeding. And I'm looking at the Minister of Finland, Norway, representative of Sweden, and myself talking. The Nordics can help create this movement because we work extremely well together. Secondly, and this is about the partners. Iceland is now opening an embassy in Sierra Leone. We want to start a cooperation program with Sierra Leone. Thank you very much. Good to see you here. New partner. Aquatic and Blue Food should be a part of the school feeding program, but we need you people, our partners in Africa and Latin America, to come and say to the donors, we want to prioritize in favor of school feeding programs. And David, when you meet all these people you're always telling us about, tell them you have to demand more money for school feeding programs, even if even if we have to make tough political questions and cut some of the losses. This will be tough, but we need to do it. And on that note, I would just say, partners and donors, we need to work together on prioritizing in favor of school feeding. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And it's good that we're not saying it, but you're saying it. Thank you so much for helping us there. All right. The second session, the second part of the day was, as you can see, really very much devoted to the investment and the financing landscape. Some of the challenges that were brought to the table by Lisbeth, by Tariq and others, some of the bottlenecks that we're seeing in the system, inefficiencies in the system as well. All of that we really need your help, your support to overcome. There's a lot that we could be doing in the donor landscape if we could fix some of those inefficiencies that are happening across the landscape, but also matching the really important domestic commitments that governments are making, which is really what we heard earlier this morning. I don't want to take up much more time because I want to invite Minister Almeida to speak to us. Welcome to the UAE, to be here with us. Through Dubai Cares, you've already been present, but we're very happy that the government is now joining us. And please, over to you. Tell us what your reactions are to the meeting. I know you've been very interested in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Carmen. It's really been wonderful to hear you all. It's so refreshing, and I've been scribbling here things that you've really inspired me to do in my own country. I want to first thank Finland and France as well for co-leading this. I didn't realize how powerful School Meals Coalition or how powerful this tool is. I also want to thank you, David, and the World Food Programme for all your efforts in being the secretariat of this really important cause. And of course, Tariq, he was the one behind me saying, Mariam, you have to come, you have to come. And I was like, okay, I mean, I've got the food security hat on under the Climate Change and Environment Ministry, but I didn't realize how important this tool is for so many things. And I want to bring in the multi-sectoral approach of the climate into this. As you all know, the UAE will be hosting COP28 next year. I really want to make sure that food systems transformation, which my colleague Anne talked about very much, also the blue economy, which Stefan also talked about, all this comes into this food systems transformation. So we want to make sure that food systems transformation has as much of a stage as all the energy conversation that's going on. And I really want to sort of offer that the UAE, first of all, Tariq mentioned it, the UAE is joining the School Meals Coalition, so you can add us now to the list of countries. I also want to offer that the UAE wants to champion the School Meals Coalition, us being the first Arab state to do so. I will put all my efforts to promote and amplify everything you're doing here, and also take it into COP28 and make sure that we have something going on there for you as well. So I really have to say it's just been such an inspiration, and I really want to make sure I speak to all of you because everyone's bringing their own set of ideas. Ironically, same as what Anne said in Norway, we're doing a lot outside of the country, but inside the UAE, there's also a lot we can do on school meals, looking at it on the nutrition side as well. And so I'm going to be speaking to a lot of you to get those ideas so that we can also do what we have to do as a country. So thanks for that.
Thank you so much for that, and well, welcome to the coalition, no? Next year is going to be a pretty important year for all of our efforts as we take this forward. Tariq mentioned we're just starting, but 2023 is important. We have COP28, and thank you so much for agreeing to make sure that this is an agenda that features in that. But also France today announcing that they will be hosting the global meeting of the coalition. We have 73 countries now that are part of the coalition, so I hope you have room for all of us in Paris next year. But thank you very much for President Macron's decision to host the global meeting, the global ministerial meeting of the coalition next year. So in the afternoon, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what do we do in 2023? How do we build this roadmap towards really growing this movement and bringing it together in the various sectors? Many of you have leadership in many of these sectors where we need to take this forward. So the afternoon's going to be devoted to really getting a bit of our hands dirty in terms of what does this really mean for us to be moving this forward as we build on the successes already. I just want to close here, give it over to Minister Skinnery. Thank you so much for having us and for your leadership. Over to you to help us close this morning panel.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen, and thank you so much, UAE, and I hope that, and I know that you're really paving the way for the whole Gulf region and also paving the way for COP28, so we really appreciate. There are several key and important takeaways, and maybe I just focus on three major ones. First of all, the nature of school meals, holistic and multi-sectoral. Education, health, social protection, agriculture, but also energy, water, climate. So, in other words, school meals bring benefits in many, many fields. Secondly, a particularly important point is how we can boost the local economy through local agriculture and local job creation. And, of course, the supply chains, the whole value chains as we want to envisage the future. And thirdly, it's so clear that many low-income countries will need support for a few years to come, but through local development, gradually, little by little, a shift to more domestic funding can be possible, like Cristina Duarte said. And then, of course, the work we do as far as tax and development concept for the developing world, what we're doing with OECD, it's so important that we have the whole team in place, including digitalization of taxation, custom systems, everything when it comes to local earnings. So it's a huge question that we approach together. So in other words, we're building a system of solutions, not a sector. And I think this is something I really want to underline. And once again, I want to thank you and thank David. And now I will give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. The commitment here, the excitement, everyone around the table. I wasn't so sure how this was going to really go. You never know. I've go to a lot of UN and other type meetings. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a waste of time, you know. But this is practical, common sense, execution. How do we get it done? Where have we come from, and now where are we going? And so this afternoon, to me, is a very important time to plan out how do we take it to the next level. Because we've actually achieved quite a bit in the last couple of years. But now I think it's really time to springboard it to a whole nother level. And I was sitting there thinking about another area that we didn't touch on today is debt swap. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of countries that are bound by a lot of debt, particularly, for example, Chinese debt. I mean, there's no reason that many countries like China can't be saying, all right, how about let's convert that into school meals programs. We're doing that with several countries now. Mm-hmm. A tremendous opportunity as well as so many others. So thank you for the time. Miriam, thank you for the commitment. Of course, I always get excited when you and Reem show up. Y'all are always a bowl full of energy and excitement. And so thank you for the leadership. All of you around the table, I could go around with each and every one of you, but thank you on behalf of the World Food Program, but more importantly, on behalf of the children who we're investing into the future. I really am excited about this. With so much misery around the world today and so much food insecurity, at a time like this when there seems to be so much darkness and so much anguish about the future, to have a bright light amidst the storm is really a good thing. And so let's just take it to another level. And Carmen, y'all have done a magnificent job. This has been very, very productive. Thank you.
Thank you. I get to keep my job then. I didn't make him sit through a useless meeting.
She was joking, she gets to keep her job. I said, look, I'm not the leader of the World Food Program. I'm the cheerleader of the World Food Program. I got a bunch of leaders.
Now I would like to give the floor to France, since your commitment, Mr. Macron's commitment, it's been so important for the coalition, so please.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. D'abord, moi aussi, je voulais vous remercier tous d'être là et pour la session de ce matin. Et je trouve que le format ici est en effet assez idéal. Et j'étais en train de penser à l'année prochaine à Paris. Et je me disais, finalement, c'est un bon format. Il faudrait reproduire un petit peu le même modèle pour que ce soit à la fois varié, opérationnel, que chacun puisse participer à la conversation. Donc, nos amis de Finlande mettent la barre très haut. You're setting the bar very high. Concernant l'engagement de la France, donc d'abord, bien sûr, nous sommes plus convaincus que jamais de participer activement à notre coalition ici. Nous la soutenons à travers un don de 2 millions d'euros pour le secrétariat auprès du Programme alimentaire mondial. Et nous déployons également une experte technique française qui fait partie, je crois, de votre équipe, Carmen. Donc ça, c'est pour la partie secrétariat. Concernant les différents projets, aujourd'hui, sur l'alimentation scolaire, nous versons au total 28 millions d'euros chaque année, avec deux partenaires privilégiés, le PAM, le Programme alimentaire mondial, pour lequel je peux citer par exemple ce que nous faisons ensemble au Burkina Faso ou en Afghanistan, en Haïti, bientôt en Ukraine. Et nous travaillons également beaucoup avec le Partenariat mondial pour l'éducation, le GPE. Et je comprends, Charles, que le Partenariat mondial va augmenter sa contribution pour la restauration scolaire, pour l'alimentation scolaire. Donc mécaniquement, nous allons aussi, avec vous, augmenter notre participation. Donc, je pense que ça fait déjà une base assez importante, mais nous souhaitons aller plus loin et avoir un effet de levier avec vous encore plus fort pour soutenir tous ces projets et impliquer de plus en plus le secteur privé, nos entreprises. C'est aussi le cas pour la question de la sécurité alimentaire en général, mais pour l'alimentation scolaire en particulier. Donc merci beaucoup, merci à Dubai Cares also, également, et à tous les partenaires des fondations, la fondation Rockefeller, avec qui nous travaillons extrêmement bien, déjà sur beaucoup de programmes. Et donc, je pense que ça fait une plateforme que nous allons continuer à renforcer. Concernant la réunion de la coalition l'année prochaine, vous voulez que j'en parle maintenant aussi ? Donc on va regarder ça avec vous tous. Je pense que, on en parlait tout à l'heure, peut-être que le mois d'octobre pourrait être une bonne période pour réunir nos 73 membres après l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies et avant la COP28. Juste avant, voilà. Ça pourrait être un building block going towards the COP28. Donc, on va regarder ça ensemble et toutes les idées sont les bienvenues, toutes les contributions pour faire de cette rencontre à Paris un succès. Je pense que nous parlerons aussi à l'UNESCO, Madame la secrétaire générale adjointe, avec les Nations Unies. C'est important d'associer aussi, je pense, l'UNESCO, qui est, comme vous le savez, basée à Paris. Donc, on reviendra vers vous avec des idées un peu plus précises. Et en tout cas, on est très heureux et très honorés de préparer cela ensemble. Merci.
Okay, so I think we're done with the morning part of the meeting. We have a Finnish school meal now, a Finnish-inspired school meal, and a break for lunch, and we resume the afternoon meeting at 2:30. The afternoon is a different format. It's going to be an off-the-record, offline meeting, and we will have an opportunity again to come back and discuss some of the topics that were brought up during the morning towards a bit of an action planning meeting in the afternoon, but also giving you an opportunity to brief you on where we are with the coalition more substantively. So enjoy your lunch. Minister?
Well, thank you so much. Still, there is one important thing I want to mention, and of course I think that throughout the morning session we have really learned, at least we are convinced, what is the value of school meal system, and I will keep championing on this issue in the global agenda, and of course call for the others to follow this example. This session will end with the declaration of the School Meal Coalition's Taskforce members. And I really want to underline this because this shows the commitment of everyone present to drive this agenda further. So once again, many thanks for an excellent discussion and many thanks for joining the declaration. It's a very important milestone for us, for the coalition and the world. Thank you so much.
They're telling us that we have a photo opportunity just before lunch, and I think they want us to line up there, over there, yeah? Yes. Yeah? Okay.
Well, yes, we will have a break now for lunch, which I believe is interesting. So we will be serving you with the buffet lunch of selected Finnish school meal dishes, the favorite ones chosen by the children themselves. But before that, we will be hearing a very short introduction on Finnish school meals by the city of Helsinki. Hopefully we have the representative here. So Mrs. Mervi Korhonen, please, the floor is yours.
Dear ministers, excellencies and guests, thank you very much for inviting me to speak about Finnish school meals. Every Finn has memories about school meals. We can instantly name what was our favorite dish. Here in Helsinki, we ask pupils and students their favorite school meals every year. Last year, top 3 dishes were number 1, fish fingers, number 2, spinach pancakes, and number 3, chicken curry. Equal access to education and free school meals have played an important part in strengthening economic growth and transforming Finland into a knowledge-based society. In Finland, each child and young person attending pre-primary, basic and upper secondary education have been enjoying a free school meal almost for 8 years, the longest running free of charge school meals in the world. The law providing free of charge meals for all pupils came into force in 1943 and went nationwide 5 years later, so almost 8 years ago. City of Helsinki introduced the free school lunch immediately in 1943. Those days, the free warm meal was either soup or porridge served once a day. Today, our pupils and students can enjoy balanced, healthy school meals every day, planned according to the National Nutrition Council recommendations. School meals generally consist of typical Finnish foods. Every school day, we serve a warm main course, either fish, meat, or vegetarian, vegetables as side, bread, and drinks. You will shortly experience yourself typical Finnish school meal, like Minister said. Sustainability is an important value of food services. We are increasing vegetarian food and reducing red meat. Since 2003, the students and pupils have been able to choose a vegan diet meal. From 2007, we have offered everyday 2 meal options, and the other option is always a vegetarian meal. In this, Helsinki was the forerunner in Finland. 2010, the City Council of Helsinki decided on a weekly vegetarian day in all schools. On a vegetarian day, 2 vegetarian main dishes are offered. The City Council of Helsinki has set a goal to reduce the consumption of meat and dairy products by 50% by year 2025. Our aim is also reduce food waste. To promote sustainable solution, we are using more climate-friendly and locally produced ingredients. For example, soy has been replaced in many recipes by broad beans. Rice has partly been replaced by oat, barley, and potatoes. We follow the Sustainable Seafood Guides, a worldwide fund of nature, and we mainly use MSC certified or Finnish fish. We have developed new fish dishes where we use Finnish lake fishes such as bream, perch, and roach. School meals are an integral part of national core curricula for basic and pre-primary education, student welfare services, and nutrition education. School meals improve pupils' health and educational outcomes. Pupils can participate in planning and implementing school meals, which fosters involvement and community spirit. A good lunch is more than nutrition. It's a break in the middle of the day that gives pleasure and relaxation and maintains the ability to learn and study. We truly know that a good school meal is an investment in the future. Let's make some new school meals memories today. I will be here at your disposal during the lunch. Thank you.
Yes, now we have the photo opportunity.